The massive crystal dome of the Grand Assembly Hall stretched high above the heads of hundreds of alien beings. Light from 3 different suns filtered through the transparent walls, casting strange colors across the floor. Representatives from 47 different worlds sat in curved rows, each species in their own special section designed for their unique needs. Admiral Sarah Chun stood at the center of the hall, looking very small compared to the giant creatures around her. Her dark blue uniform looked plain next to the bright robes and gleaming armor worn by the other military leaders. In her hands, she held a simple datapad that contained Earth's military report. The human section was near the back of the hall. Only 12 humans had been allowed to attend this meeting. They sat quietly, trying not to draw attention to themselves. Earth had joined the Galactic Council just 5 years ago, and they were still considered the new kids who did not really belong. The floor recognizes the human representative, announced Speaker Veltar, a tall being with blue skin and 4 arms. His voice echoed through the hall with a tone that suggested he found this whole thing boring. Sarah walked to the speaking platform in the center. As she moved, she could hear whispers and small laughs from the alien sections. She had heard these sounds before during the past 5 years. They always made the same jokes about humans. Honorable members of the council. Sarah began, her voice clear and steady. I present Earth's annual military capability report. She pressed a button on her datapad, and holographic images appeared in the air above her head. The first image showed Earth's orbital defense stations. They looked like simple metal rings around the planet, nothing fancy or impressive. From the Zephyrian section came a loud snort. War Marshal Crixac was a huge creature that looked like a cross between a rhinoceros and a praying mantis. His species had conquered 12 star systems and were known for their powerful weapons and aggressive tactics. Chemical rockets and metal stations? Crixac said loudly enough for everyone to hear. How quaint! Do they still use gunpowder too? Laughter rippled through several sections of the hall. The Etherians, who looked like floating jellyfish made of light, pulsed with colors that their translators said meant amusement. The Vorthek delegation, bird-like creatures with silver feathers, clicked their beaks in what passed for chuckling among their kind. Sarah continued without showing any reaction to the mockery. The next hologram showed Earth's fleet of warships. There were about 200 vessels of various sizes. They had clean, simple designs with no fancy decorations or glowing parts like the ships of other species. Our fleet consists of 237 vessels, Sarah reported. They are equipped with kinetic weapons, electromagnetic pulse systems, and nuclear deterrence. This time the laughter was louder. Senator Thylix from the Krillian Empire, a reptilian being with scales that changed color with his mood, turned bright orange, which meant he found something very funny. Nuclear weapons? Thylix hissed. Did someone say nuclear weapons? What's next? Are they going to throw rocks at their enemies? Maybe they use slingshots for long-range attacks, added Commander Zefta from the Hegemony Worlds. Her species looked like walking trees with too many eyes. The Vorthek delegation started making chittering sounds that their translators called extreme amusement. Their leader, Admiral Sektith, spread his silver wings wide as he spoke. Forgive me, human, Sektith said in a voice like wind through metal. But your weapons technology seems to be several thousand years behind the rest of the galaxy. Kinetic weapons? We stopped using those before we invented faster-than-light travel. Sarah nodded politely and continued her presentation. She showed images of Earth's ground forces, their aircraft, and their defensive systems. Everything looked basic and simple compared to what other species had shown in previous years. The Zephyrians had plasma cannons that could melt through any known material. The Etherians had energy weapons that could tear apart matter at the atomic level. The Krillians used something called quantum disruptors that could make enemy ships simply disappear. Even the smaller species had weapons that seemed like magic compared to human technology. Our ground forces number approximately 50 million active personnel, Sarah continued. They are equipped with projectile weapons, armored vehicles, and conventional explosives. War Marshal Cricksack stood up from his seat, his massive form casting a shadow over several rows of delegates. "This is ridiculous," he bellowed. "Why are we wasting time listening to this? Their entire military could not defeat a single one of our patrol ships." Murmurs of agreement came from around the hall. The hegemony delegates were making gestures that meant they thought this was all very silly. The Stellar Federation representatives, who looked like metallic spiders, were clicking their legs together in patterns that their translators said meant waste of time. Speaker Veltar raised one of his four hands for quiet, but his expression showed that he agreed with Cricksack. "Please continue, Admiral Chun. I'm sure the Council is interested in hearing about your defensive capabilities." The way he said interested made it clear that nobody was actually interested at all. Sarah could see beings in the audience checking their personal devices, having quiet conversations, or simply staring off into space. Showed the final set of images from her datapad. These were pictures of Earth space monitoring systems and early warning networks. They looked like simple metal dishes and basic computer systems. "Our defensive strategy relies on early detection and coordinated response," Sarah explained. "We maintain monitoring stations throughout our system and have established communication networks with neighboring systems." This brought another wave of laughter. Admiral Sektith flapped his wings in what was definitely mockery among his people. "Early warning systems?" Sektith squawked. "What do you do when you detect an enemy? Send them a strongly worded message, asking them to go away?" The Etherian delegation pulsed with bright colors that meant they found this hilarious. One of them, Ambassador Luxara, floated higher than the others as she spoke. "Perhaps they plan to defeat their enemies with politeness," Luxara said in a voice like singing crystals. "Or maybe they will bore them to death with talks about peace and cooperation." Even some of the usually serious delegates started laughing at this. The Quantum Collective, beings made of pure energy contained in mechanical bodies, actually made sounds that their translators called electronic giggling. Sarah finished her presentation and walked back toward the speaking platform's edge. As she did, she could hear more comments from the audience. 50 million soldiers with metal weapons," someone whispered loudly. "My homeworld's police force could handle that." "I heard they still fight wars on the surface of planets," came another voice. "Instead of just destroying the planets from space like civilized people." "Primitive doesn't even begin to describe it," added a third speaker. War Marshal Cricksack stood up again, this time to address the entire assembly. "I move that we excuse the humans from future military presentations," he announced. "Clearly they have nothing to contribute to our collective defense. Perhaps they could focus on growing food or making simple tools for the more advanced species." This suggestion brought the loudest laughter yet. Several delegates applauded the idea. The Krillian section started chanting something that their translators said meant, "Back to the caves." Speaker Veltar looked at Sarah with an expression that might have been pity. "Admiral Chung, does Earth have anything else to add to this presentation? Any hidden capabilities we should know about?" Sarah stood quietly for a moment, looking out at the sea of alien faces. Some were still laughing. Others had already gone back to their personal conversations or devices. A few were looking at her with something that might have been sympathy, but most just seemed bored or amused. "No, honored speaker," Sarah said finally. "This completes Earth's military capability report." "Very well," Veltar replied. "The Council thanks Earth for its thorough presentation. Next, we will hear from the Stellar Federation about their new quantum torpedo technology." As Sarah walked back to the human section, the hall filled with excited chatter about the Stellar Federation's presentation. Nobody was talking about Earth anymore. They had already moved on to more interesting topics. The human delegates sat in uncomfortable silence as the Stellar Federation representative, a mechanical spider the size of a small car, demonstrated holographic images of weapons that could destroy entire moons. The technology was so advanced that even the other species seemed impressed. "Remarkable," breathed Ambassador Luxara from the Etherian delegation. The precision is extraordinary. Indeed, agreed Admiral Sektoth. Such weapons would be invaluable in our ongoing border disputes with the Void Stalkers. Sarah took her seat among the other humans and quietly put away her datapad. Around her, the other human delegates looked embarrassed and frustrated. Colonel Martinez, sitting to her left, leaned over and whispered angrily. "They're treating us like children with toy soldiers," he said quietly. "Let them," Sarah replied, her voice so low that only Martinez could hear. "Sometimes it's better when people underestimate you." The presentation continued with more demonstrations of advanced alien technology. Planet-cracking bombs, ships that could travel through dimensions, weapons that could stop time itself in small areas. Each new capability brought gasps of admiration from the audience. When the Stellar Federation finished, War Marshal Krikzak stood up again. "Now this is what real military power looks like," he declared, "not like the primitive toys we saw earlier." More laughter filled the hall. Sarah noticed that some of the smaller species were joining in now, probably hoping to gain favor with the more powerful members of the council. "Perhaps we should establish a special category for developing worlds," suggested Senator Thylix. "Somewhere they can play with their simple weapons without embarrassing themselves in front of the grown-ups." The suggestion was met with enthusiastic approval from most of the delegates. Sarah watched as species after species nodded their agreement. Even some of the humans looked like they wanted to sink through the floor in shame. Speaker Veltar called for order again. "We will consider all suggestions for improving future presentations," he announced. "For now, let us move on to the next item on our agenda." As the meeting continued, Sarah sat quietly and listened to more discussions about military technology and defensive strategies. Nobody asked for human input. Nobody seemed to remember that Earth was even part of the council. But Sarah remembered something that none of these laughing, superior beings knew. She remembered the real reason why Earth had joined the Galactic Council 5 years ago. And she remembered what was hidden in the dark spaces between stars, waiting patiently for the day when it might be needed. For now, though, she was content to let them laugh. 3 months had passed since the humiliating presentation at the Grand Assembly Hall. Life continued as normal throughout the galaxy. Trade ships moved between star systems, diplomatic meetings were held on schedule, and the various species went about their daily business without much worry. Admiral Sarah Chun was in her office on the human embassy station orbiting the council homeworld when the first alarm sounded. It was a soft beeping sound that meant someone was calling her on the emergency communication line. She pressed a button on her desk, and the face of Commander Wells appeared on her screen. "Admiral, we're getting reports from the outer monitoring stations," Wells said, his voice tight with concern. "Long-range sensors are picking up something big moving toward the galaxy's core systems." Sarah sat up straighter in her chair. "How big?" "Unknown, ma'am. The readings are unusual, whatever it is. It's massive and it's moving fast. The Vorthak were the first to detect it. They're calling an emergency council session." Sarah nodded grimly. "I'll be there in an hour." The Grand Assembly Hall looked very different during an emergency session. Instead of the casual atmosphere of a regular meeting, there was tension in the air. Delegates hurried to their seats, speaking in urgent whispers. The usual jokes and laughter were nowhere to be heard. Speaker Veltar called the session to order with all 4 of his hands raised high. "Council members, we face a situation that requires immediate attention. Admiral Sektoth of the Vorthak will present the findings." The silver-feathered bird-like being flew to the center of the hall, his wings spread wide with worry. As he landed on the speaking platform, holographic displays filled the air above him. 3 days ago, our deep space monitoring stations detected a massive fleet approaching from the void between galaxies, Sektoth announced. Initial scans suggest over 50,000 vessels of unknown design. Gasps and shocked murmurs filled the hall. Even the usually calm Etherians began pulsing with colors that meant alarm and fear. The holographic display showed star charts with a red arrow pointing toward the galaxy's center. The arrow was enormous, suggesting something much larger than any fleet anyone had ever seen. "We have identified the threat," Sectith continued, his voice becoming even more serious. "They are the Devourers." The name hit the assembly like a physical blow. Several delegates stood up in shock. Others began talking frantically to their neighbors. The Devourers were spoken of in whispers throughout the galaxy. They were a legend, a nightmare story told to frighten young beings. War Marshal Cricksack from the Zephyrian delegation stood up, his massive form trembling with what might have been fear. "Are you certain? The Devourers are just stories. Old tales, meant to scare children." "I'm afraid not," Sectith replied. "We have confirmed their identity through analysis of their ship designs and movement patterns. They match historical records from the 17 star systems they have already consumed." The hall erupted in panicked voices. The mechanical beings of the Stellar Federation were clicking their legs so rapidly it sounded like machine gun fire. The hegemony delegates were making high-pitched sounds that their translators called extreme distress. Speaker Veltar had to use an amplified voice to restore order. "Silence. We must remain calm and work together to address this threat." Ambassador Luxara from the Etherean delegation floated higher than usual, her light form pulsing with rapid color changes. "What do we know about their capabilities? How long do we have?" Admiral Sectoth manipulated the holographic display to show more detailed information. "Based on their current speed and trajectory, they will reach the Outer Council worlds in approximately 6 weeks. As for their capabilities?" He paused, his feathers rustling with anxiety. "They are unlike anything we have faced before." The display changed to show images recovered from the last systems to encounter the Devourers. What the Council members saw made many of them wish they hadn't looked. The Devourers' ships were dark, angular things that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. They moved in perfect formation, like parts of a single massive organism. But most terrifying of all were the planets they left behind. Where once there had been thriving worlds full of life, now there were only empty husks drained of everything useful. "They don't just conquer," Sectith explained. "They consume. Every bit of metal, every drop of water, every living thing. They strip planets down to bare rock and then they move on to the next system." Senator Thylix from the Krillian Empire was the first to speak after the horrifying images disappeared. His scales had turned a deep purple color that meant serious fear among his people. "What is our combined military strength compared to theirs?" Thylix asked. "Our total fleet strength across all council members is approximately 12,000. "Vessels," Sectith replied. "They have 50,000. But numbers alone don't tell the whole story. Their technology appears to be ... adaptive." "What does that mean?" demanded Commander Zefta from the hegemony worlds. "It means they learn from every attack," Sectith explained. "Historical records show that weapons which work against them initially become useless after a few battles. They adapt their defenses." In real time, the implications of this sank in slowly. The assembled delegates began to understand that they weren't just outnumbered. They were facing an enemy that could evolve faster than they could change tactics. War Marshal Cricksack stood up again, this time without any of his usual arrogance. "We must mobilize immediately. Every ship, every weapon, every soldier. This is a fight for the survival of our civilization." "Agreed," said Ambassador Luxara. "The Etherean Collective will commit our entire fleet to the defense effort." One by one, the major military powers of the galaxy pledged their forces. The Vorthak would provide their advanced reconnaissance ships and tactical expertise. The Krillians would bring their quantum disruptors and heavy assault vessels. The Stellar Federation offered their planet-cracking torpedoes and shield technology, even. The smaller species promised to contribute what they could. The Quantum Collective would provide their energy weapons. The hegemony worlds would supply their massive carrier ships filled with fighter craft. As each species made their commitment, eyes gradually turned to the human section. Sarah Chun had been sitting quietly, listening to the discussions without saying a word. Finally, Speaker Veltar addressed her directly. Admiral Chun, what can Earth contribute to the defense effort? Sarah stood up slowly. Around her, she could feel the mixture of hope and doubt from the other delegates. They needed every ship they could get, but nobody expected much from the humans. Earth will commit our entire fleet, Sarah said simply. 237 vessels, as reported in our last military assessment. There was a moment of awkward silence. Everyone remembered the primitive weapons and simple technology that Earth had shown just 3 months ago. 200 ships with kinetic weapons wouldn't make much difference against 50,000 advanced alien vessels. War. Marshal Crixak tried to be diplomatic. Every contribution is valuable, Admiral Chun. Your ships can support the main battle lines. We'll take the rear guard positions, added Senator Thylix, his scales showing the color pattern for polite dismissal. Keep the humans safe while the real military forces engage the enemy. Sarah nodded without any sign of offense. As you wish. Earth's forces will take whatever position the Council deems appropriate. The emergency session continued for several more hours as military leaders worked out logistics and battle plans. The strategy was simple. Meet the Devourers at the edge of Council space with overwhelming force and try to stop them before they reached any populated systems. The greatest military minds in the galaxy worked together on the plan. Admiral Sektov would coordinate reconnaissance and early warning. War Marshal Crixak would lead the main assault forces. The Etherians would provide long-range energy bombardment while the Stellar Federation ships used their quantum weapons to punch through enemy lines. Human forces were assigned to protect supply lines and evacuate civilians if the main battle went badly. Nobody said it out loud, but everyone understood that the humans were being kept out of the real fighting for their own safety. 2 weeks later, the combined Council fleet assembled in the Helix Nebula just outside the galaxy's main spiral arm. It was the largest gathering of military forces in galactic history. 12,000 ships from 47 different species, all working together against a common threat. Admiral Sarah Chun stood on the bridge of the Earth flagship, a simple vessel called the Terra Nova. Through the main viewer, she could see the vast array of alien warships spread out across space. Massive Krillian dreadnoughts bristled with quantum weapons. Elegant Etherian ships glowed with contained energy. The mechanical precision of Stellar Federation vessels was obvious even from a distance. Compared to these marvels of technology, the human ships looked like ancient relics. Their simple metal hulls and basic weapon systems seemed almost primitive. In comparison, Admiral, called Lieutenant Park from the communications station, we're receiving the final battle plan from Council Command. Human forces are to remain in Sector 77, approximately 50,000 kilometers behind the main battle line. Sarah nodded. Acknowledged. Signal all Earth vessels to take position as ordered. As the human fleet moved to their assigned position, Sarah watched the alien forces prepare for battle. She had to admit they were impressive. The coordination between different species was remarkable. The sheer firepower they could bring to bear was staggering. But Sarah also remembered something else. She remembered the classified files locked away in the deepest vaults of Earth's military archives. Files that contained the real history of humanity's expansion into space. Files that told a very different story about human military capabilities. For now, though, those files would remain secret. Earth would play the role assigned to them by the Council. They would be the primitive species with simple weapons, staying safely in the rear while the advanced civilizations fought the real war. The first contact with Devourer scouts came 3 days later. Long-range sensors detected small groups of enemy ships probing the edges of the Council formation. Admiral Sektoth dispatched Vorthic reconnaissance vessels to investigate. The reports that came back were troubling. The Devourer ships moved in ways that seemed to ignore the normal laws of physics. They could accelerate and turn faster than should have been possible. Their hulls absorbed sensor scans, making it difficult to get accurate readings on their capabilities. They're testing us, reported Admiral Sektoth during the daily command briefing. Probing our formations, studying our tactics? They're learning about us before the main battle begins. War Marshal Cricksack was confident despite the troubling reports. Let them study us. When our full fleet engages them, they'll see what real military power looks like. The confidence was shared throughout the Council fleet. They had the best technology in the galaxy. They had tactical expertise built up over thousands of years of warfare. They had the advantage of fighting together on familiar ground. What they didn't have was experience fighting an enemy that could adapt to any weapon or tactic within hours of encountering it. The main Devourer fleet arrived exactly when the calculations predicted. 50,000 dark ships emerged from the void like a spreading stain across the stars. They moved in perfect coordination, forming attack patterns that no organic mind could have devised. The Council fleet moved to intercept them, 12,000. Ships against 50,000. The odds were terrible, but the alien commanders were still confident. They had quality on their side. Even if they lacked quantity, the first engagement began with long-range energy bombardment from the Etherian ships. Beams of pure light lanced across space, striking the leading edge of the Devourer formation. Several enemy ships were destroyed immediately, their hulls unable to withstand the concentrated energy. Cheers went up throughout the Council fleet. The enemy could be hurt. They could be defeated, but within minutes, the situation began to change. The next wave of Etherian attacks seemed to have less effect. The Devourer ships were already adapting their defenses, learning to absorb or deflect the energy weapons. The Stellar Federation launched their quantum torpedoes next. The first salvo was devastatingly effective, causing entire sections of the enemy fleet to simply vanish from existence. But by the third salvo, the torpedoes were being intercepted or neutralized before they could reach their targets. "They're adapting faster than we anticipated," Admiral Sekteth reported, his voice tight with worry. "Weapons that worked minutes ago are now useless." War Marshal Cricksack ordered the Zephyrian assault ships forward. Their plasma cannons opened fire at close range, melting through enemy hulls with superheated matter. For a brief moment, it looked like the close-range assault might work. Then the Devourers began returning fire. Their weapons were unlike anything the Council forces had seen before. Dark energy beams that seemed to drain the life from whatever they touched. Projectiles that phased through shields as if they weren't there. And most terrifying of all, some kind of virus weapon that turned Council ships against their own allies. The battle that was supposed to be a decisive victory quickly turned into a desperate retreat. Council ships fled in all directions as the adaptive Devourer fleet overwhelmed their defenses and turned their own tactics against them. In the space of 6 hours, the greatest military force in galactic history had been shattered. Thousands of ships were destroyed or captured. The survivors limped back toward Council space, carrying the terrible news of their defeat. The Devourers, meanwhile, continued their advance toward the core worlds, their dark fleet now swollen with captured Council technology and the knowledge of how to defeat everything the galaxy could throw at them. From her position in the rear guard, Admiral Sarah Chun watched the disaster unfold with growing concern. Around her, the other human ships maintained their assigned positions, waiting for orders that might never come. "Admiral," called Lieutenant Park, "we're receiving scattered communications from the retreating Council forces." "It sounds like they're in full retreat," Sarah nodded grimly. "Signal Earth Command. Tell them we may need to implement Protocol 7 after all." "Ma'am?" Park looked confused. "I'm not familiar with that protocol." Sarah looked out at the approaching Devourer fleet, now enhanced with stolen Council technology and adaptive capabilities that made them nearly unstoppable. "No reason you should be, Lieutenant," she replied quietly. "It's been classified for over 200 years. But I think it's time to dust off some very old files." The emergency session in the Grand Assembly Hall was very different from the last one. 3 weeks had passed since the disaster at Helix Nebula, and the mood was one of complete despair. Many seats were empty because their owners had died in the battle. Others were absent because their species were too busy evacuating their homeworlds to attend meetings. Speaker. Veltar looked older and more tired than Sarah had ever seen him. His blue skin had taken on a gray tint, and his forearms moved slowly as he called the session to order. Council members, Veltar began, his voice heavy with defeat. We gather today to discuss our remaining options in the face of the Devourer. Advance Admiral Sectith will provide the current tactical assessment. The Vorthic Admiral flew to the center platform, but his usual grace was gone. One of his wings had been damaged in the battle, and he moved with obvious pain. His silver feathers were dulled, and many were missing entirely. The situation is grave, Sectith reported. Our combined fleet has been reduced to fewer than 3,000 operational vessels. The Devourers have absorbed our technology and adapted to all of our weapons. They now possess quantum disruptors, energy weapons, and plasma cannons in addition to their original capabilities. Holographic displays showed the current positions of both fleets. The Devourer Armada, now grown to over 60,000 ships through captured Council vessels, was moving steadily toward the core worlds. The remaining Council forces were scattered and retreating. How long until they reached the core systems? Asked Ambassador Luxara. The Etherean's light had dimmed considerably, and her usual bright colors were muted with grief. At their current speed, approximately 2 weeks, Sectith replied. We have evacuation ships moving civilians from the outer colonies, but there simply isn't enough time to save everyone. War Marshal Crixak stood up from his seat, but the massive Zephyrian looked broken. His proud bearing was gone, replaced by the slouch of defeat. Nearly half of his species' fleet had been lost in the battle. What about the defensive installations around the core worlds? Crixak asked. Surely they can slow the advance. The Devourers have studied our defensive strategies, Sectith answered. They know how to neutralize our fixed installations. The platforms around Zentari Prime lasted less than 4 hours against their adapted weapons. Senator Thylix from the Krillian Empire was the next to speak. His scales had remained the deep purple of fear ever since the battle. Are we seriously considering surrender, negotiating with these creatures? We've tried, replied Commander Zefta. They don't respond to any communications. They don't seem interested in anything except consumption. As far as we can tell, they view all organic life as nothing more than fuel for their expansion. The hall fell into depressed silence. These beings had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years. They had built vast civilizations, created incredible technologies, and conquered countless challenges. Now they faced extinction at the hands of an enemy they couldn't understand or defeat. Perhaps, said one of the Quantum Collective representatives, we should focus on preserving what we can. Seed ships to other galaxies. Ensure that our cultures survive even if our worlds do not. This suggestion sparked a brief discussion about evacuation plans and survival strategies. But everyone knew the truth. They didn't have enough ships to evacuate more than a tiny fraction of the galaxy's population. Billions would die when the Devourers arrived. Admiral Sarah Chun had been sitting quietly through the entire session, listening to the despair and defeat in every voice. Finally, she stood up from her seat in the human section. Honored Speaker, Sarah said clearly, I request permission to address the Council. The hall turned to look at her. Some faces showed surprise that the human representative wanted to speak. Others showed polite resignation, as if they were willing to listen to anyone who might have an idea, no matter how unlikely. The floor recognizes Admiral Chun, Veltar said wearily. Sarah walked to the center platform, just as she had 3 months earlier for her military presentation. But this time there were no mocking laughs or dismissive comments. The assembled delegates watched her with desperate hope, willing to listen to any possible solution. Council members, Sarah began, I need to share some information that Earth has kept classified until now. Information about our true military capabilities. This got everyone's attention immediately. War Marshal Crixak leaned forward in his seat. Ambassador Luxara's light flickered with renewed interest. Even the broken Admiral Sectoth turned to focus on Sarah's words. The presentation I gave 3 months ago, Sarah continued, showed only a small portion of Earth's actual military strength. We have learned, through centuries of our own devastating wars, that it is wise to never reveal your full capabilities until absolutely necessary. What are you saying? Demanded Senator Thylix, his scales shifting from purple to orange, with excitement. Are you telling us that humans have been hiding advanced weapons? Sarah nodded. I'm saying that humanity has spent the last 500 years preparing for exactly this kind of threat. We have been watching the galaxy, learning from every conflict, and developing technologies specifically designed to fight enemies that conventional weapons cannot defeat. She pulled out her datapad and activated it. But instead of the simple holographic displays from her previous presentation, the air above the platform filled with images that made the assembled delegates gasp in shock. The first image showed a human ship, but it was nothing like the simple vessels from the earlier presentation. The ship was sleek and dark, its hull seeming to bend light around it. It was larger than the biggest Krillian dreadnought, and its design was unlike anything anyone in the hall had ever seen. This is the Earthship Prometheus, Sarah explained. It is one of 50 vessels in our strategic defense fleet. Each ship is equipped with quantum-entangled weapon systems, matter-antimatter cascade bombs, and adaptive AI tactical networks. The next image showed an entire fleet of these mysterious ships. They moved in formations that seemed to flow like water, changing shape and position in ways that suggested incredible coordination. How is this possible? Whispered Ambassador Luxara. We've monitored your communications, your industrial capacity. There's no way you could have built such vessels without us knowing. Sarah smiled for the first time since the crisis began. Our actual industrial capacity is not located in this galaxy. Humanity began expanding into neighboring galaxies over 300 years ago. What you see here represents the combined resources of 17 different star systems across 4 galaxies. The hall erupted in shocked voices. The implications were staggering. Humanity wasn't the primitive, struggling species they had appeared to be. They were already an intergalactic civilization with resources that dwarfed anything the Council could imagine. But why hide this? Demanded War Marshal Krikzak. Why pretend to be weak and primitive? Because, Sarah replied, we learned long ago that being underestimated is often the greatest advantage you can have. While you were building larger weapons and stronger ships, we were studying your mistakes and preparing for the enemies you couldn't defeat. The holographic display changed again, showing weapon tests that made the assembled delegates step back. In their seats, beams of energy that could destabilize stars, gravitational weapons that could compress matter into black holes, and most incredible of all, technology that seemed to manipulate the basic laws of physics themselves. These weapons are designed specifically to fight adaptive enemies, Sarah explained. Each system uses principles that cannot be easily copied or countered. Where conventional weapons rely on energy or matter, ours manipulate fundamental forces that exist at the quantum level. Admiral Sektif found his voice first. Are you saying you have weapons that the Devourers cannot adapt to? I'm saying we have weapons that work on principles the Devourers have never encountered, Sarah replied. Our quantum-entangled systems exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Our gravitational manipulators affect space-time itself, and our AI networks operate on quantum consciousness principles that make them impossible to hack or infiltrate. The excitement in the hall was building rapidly. For the first time in weeks, the assembled delegates were hearing something other than news of defeat and retreat. How many ships do you have? Asked Commander Zefta. Our strategic defense fleet consists of 50 capital ships, each more powerful than anything currently in this galaxy, Sarah answered. But more importantly, we have tactical systems that can coordinate the actions of every human vessel as if they were parts of a single organism. She manipulated her datapad again, and the holographic display showed a battle simulation. Human ships moved in perfect coordination, their weapons firing in patterns that seemed almost like a dance. Enemy vessels representing the Devourers. Tried to adapt, but the human tactics changed faster than the enemy could evolve. This is theoretical, of course, Sarah said. We've never actually fought the Devourers. But our simulations suggest that our adaptive AI can outthink their adaptive technology. War Marshal Kricksack stood up, his earlier depression replaced by something that might have been hope. When can these ships arrive? How quickly can they get here? They're already here, Sarah replied calmly. The silence that followed was absolute. Every being in the hall stared at Sarah as if she had just announced that the suns were about to explode. What do you mean, they're already here? Asked Speaker Veltar. Sarah touched her datapad one more time. The main viewing screen of the assembly hall, which usually showed peaceful starfields, suddenly filled with an image that made everyone forget how to breathe. 50 ships hung in space just outside the station. But calling them ships was like calling a mountain a rock. These vessels were enormous, sleek, and beautiful in a way that seemed almost alive. They moved slowly through space, their hulls shifting and changing as if they were made of liquid metal. The Earth Strategic Defense Fleet has been monitoring the situation since the first Devourer scouts were detected, Sarah explained. We've been studying their capabilities and preparing our response. With the Council's permission, we are ready. To engage the enemy, the hall exploded into excited chatter. Delegates were standing up, pointing at the viewing screen, talking rapidly to their neighbors. For the first time since the disaster at Helix Nebula, there was hope in their voices. But Admiral Sektoth raised a wing for attention. Admiral Chun, these ships are impressive, but the Devourers still outnumber you 60,000 to 50. How can you hope to defeat such overwhelming numbers? Sarah's smile became wider and more confident. Admiral Sektoth, you're thinking about this in terms of conventional warfare. Ship against ship, weapon against weapon, but our approach is very different. The holographic display changed to show tactical projections that were unlike anything the Council had ever seen. Instead of traditional battle lines and weapon exchanges, the human strategy looked more like a complex puzzle being solved in real time. We don't plan to fight 60,000 ships, Sarah explained. We plan to turn their greatest strength into their greatest weakness. Their adaptive technology requires central coordination. Disrupt that coordination, and 60,000 ships become 60,000 individual targets with no way to share information. How do you disrupt something we don't even understand? Asked Ambassador Luxara. By understanding it better than they do, Sarah replied. Humanity has been studying adaptive AI for over 400 years. We know how it works because we built our own versions and then learned how to defeat them. The Devourer's biggest advantage is that no one has ever successfully fought their adaptation systems. But we have. She paused and looked around the hall at the faces staring back at her. These beings had spent months in despair, convinced that their civilizations were doomed. Now they were hearing that salvation might be possible. There's something else you need to understand, Sarah continued. Earth didn't join the Galactic Council 5 years ago because we needed your protection or technology. We joined because we had been monitoring your progress and we knew this day would come. We've been preparing for this specific threat for over 2 centuries. The implications hit the assembled delegates like a physical blow. Humanity hadn't stumbled into galactic politics as primitive newcomers. They had arrived as advanced guardians, watching and waiting for the moment when their protection would be needed. You've been protecting us all along, whispered Senator Thylix, his scales showing colors that meant awe and gratitude. It's what we do, Sarah replied simply. Humanity learned long ago that the strongest civilizations are those that protect the weak, not those that exploit them. We've been quietly watching over this galaxy because we believe the cultures here are worth preserving. War Marshal Kricksack was staring at the massive human ships on the viewing screen. Why reveal this now? Why not continue to hide your capabilities? Because, Sarah said, the time for hiding is over. The Devourers represent a threat that requires our full capabilities to defeat. And because this council, this alliance of species working together despite their differences, represents something worth fighting for openly. She walked to the edge of the platform and looked out at the faces of beings from dozens of different worlds. We're not asking to take over your defense. We're asking for permission to fight alongside you. To use our hidden strength to protect something that took thousands of years to build. Speaker Veltar was the first to respond. Admiral Chun, on behalf of the Galactic Council, I formally request Earth's assistance in defending our civilization against the Devourer threat. Request granted, Sarah replied. Earth's Strategic Defense Fleet will engage the enemy in 72 hours. We suggest that all remaining Council forces be positioned to support our operations and assist with rescue and evacuation efforts. As the emergency session broke up into planning committees and tactical discussions, the mood in the hall had completely transformed. Where there had been despair, now there was hope. Where there had been defeat, now there was determination. The beings who had laughed at human primitive weapons 3 months ago now watched in awe as the most advanced military force they had ever seen prepared to save their civilization. But in the back of her mind, Sarah hoped that the weapons and strategies humanity had spent centuries developing would be enough to defeat an enemy that had already proven it could adapt to anything the galaxy could throw at it. The real test was still to come. The human fleet moved through space like shadows made solid. From the observation deck of the Council Command Station, Admiral Sektoth watched the 50 Earth ships take their positions with a mixture of awe and nervousness. Each vessel was larger than anything in the Council fleet, yet they moved with the grace of living creatures. I still can't believe we're seeing this, War Marshal Crixac said quietly. The massive Zephrien stood beside Sektoth, his earlier arrogance completely gone. 3 months ago, we were laughing at their primitive weapons. 3 months ago, they wanted us to laugh, Sektoth replied. I'm beginning to understand that humans are far more complex than any of us realized. On the main viewing screen, long-range sensors showed the approaching Devourer fleet. 60,000 dark ships moved in perfect formation toward the core worlds. Their hulls absorbed light and sensor beams, making them look like holes in space itself. They would arrive at the battle zone in less than 6 hours. Admiral Sarah Chun stood on the bridge of the Prometheus, watching the tactical displays with calm focus. Around her, the human crew worked with quiet efficiency. There was no panic, no shouting of orders, no dramatic speeches. They moved like parts of a well-designed machine. Admiral, called Commander Torres from the tactical station. All ships report ready status. The quantum entanglement network is active and synchronized. Sarah nodded. Signal the Council fleet to take position at safe distance. Minimum 50,000 kilometers from the engagement zone. Ma'am, said Lieutenant Park. The Council commanders are requesting permission to assist with the attack. Negative, Sarah replied firmly. Their weapons are useless against adaptive enemies, and their presence would only give the Devourers more technology to steal. This battle must be fought with systems the enemy has never encountered. As the human fleet spread out into attack formation, something strange began to happen. The ships started to change. Their hulls shifted and flowed like liquid metal. What had looked like traditional vessels now appeared to be something alive and organic. From the Council observation station, Ambassador Luxara watched in fascination. Are those ships transforming themselves? It appears so, answered one of the Stellar Federation representatives. The hull configurations are shifting into patterns I've never seen before. The human ships continued to change until they no longer looked like any vessel anyone had ever built. They resembled sea creatures from an alien ocean, flowing and undulating through space. Their surfaces rippled with energy patterns that seemed to pulse with their own heartbeat. Devourer fleet detected, announced the sensor operator aboard the Prometheus. Range 2 million kilometers and closing. Estimated time to contact, 4 hours and 17 minutes. Sarah walked to the center of the bridge and activated the ship's communication system. All units, this is Admiral Chun. Initiate Phase 1 of Operation Silent Thunder. Begin quantum displacement. What happened next made the watching council delegates question everything they thought they knew about physics. The human ships simply vanished. One moment they were visible on every sensor, and the next moment they were gone completely. "Where did they go?" demanded War Marshal Cricksack. "Unknown," replied Admiral Secteth, his voice filled with confusion. "They're not showing up on any of our sensors. It's as if they never existed." On the bridge of the Prometheus, Sarah could see everything perfectly. The quantum displacement system had shifted the human fleet into a parallel dimensional space. They could observe and interact with normal space, but nothing in normal space could detect them. "Fascinating technology," said Commander Torres. "We're essentially fighting from a dimension that the enemy doesn't know exists." "That's the theory," Sarah replied. "Let's see if it works in practice. Time to first contact?" 2 hours, 15 minutes, reported the sensor operator. The Devourer fleet continued its approach, completely unaware that 50 of the most advanced warships ever built were moving alongside them in dimensional space. The dark ships maintained their perfect formation, their adaptive sensors scanning for threats that they couldn't detect. "Admiral," called Lieutenant Park, "we're receiving a transmission from the lead Devourer vessel." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "They're trying to communicate? That's new. Put it through." The main screen filled with an image that made several bridge crew members step back in shock. The being that appeared was clearly artificial, but it had once been organic. Pieces of different species had been combined with mechanical parts to create something that was neither alive nor dead. "Resistance is unnecessary," the creature said in a voice that sounded like grinding metal. "Your biological and technological distinctiveness will be added to our collective. Surrender now and your assimilation will be efficient." Sarah looked at the horrifying combination of flesh and machine on her screen. "I am Admiral Sarah Chun of the Earth Strategic Defense Fleet. You have entered Council space without permission and have destroyed 17 star systems. You will cease your advance and withdraw immediately." The creature on the screen made a sound that might have been laughter. "Earth, we have analyzed your species from the battle at Helix Nebula, primitive kinetic weapons and chemical propulsion. You pose no threat to our collective." "You might be surprised," Sarah replied calmly. "Surprise is not possible," the creature responded. "We have adapted to every weapon system in this galaxy. Your Council's plasma cannons, quantum disruptors, and energy weapons are now part of our capabilities. What can your primitive species offer that we have not already assimilated?" Sarah smiled coldly. "Something you've never seen before." "Chun out." The transmission ended, and Sarah turned to her tactical officer. "Commander Torres, how long until we're in optimal firing position?" 30 minutes, Admiral. "The enemy fleet will be concentrated in the Meridian System's asteroid field. Perfect location for our gravity weapons." "Excellent. Signal all ships to prepare for Phase 2, full-spectrum quantum attack." 30 minutes later, the Devourer fleet entered the asteroid field exactly as predicted. The dark ships moved through the space rocks without concern, their sensors detecting no threats anywhere in the system. That was when the human fleet attacked. The assault began with weapons that the Devourers could not understand because they worked on principles that didn't exist in normal space. Quantum entangled beams reached across dimensional barriers to strike targets that had no idea they were being attacked. The first wave of Devourer ships simply ceased to exist. One moment they were flying through the asteroid field, and the next moment they were gone. No explosion, no debris, no energy signature. They were there, and then they were not. What happened to them? The lead Devourer creature broadcast on all frequencies. Where did our ships go? The human fleet remained invisible as they continued their attack. Gravitational weapons reached out to grab clusters of enemy vessels and compress them into points of infinite density. Hundreds of ships were crushed into black holes so small they evaporated almost instantly. On the Council observation station, the watching delegates could only see the effects of the battle. Devourer ships were disappearing or being destroyed by weapons that produced no visible beams or explosions. It looked like the enemy fleet was being attacked by ghosts. Incredible, whispered Senator Thylix. The humans are winning and we can't even see how they're doing it. The Devourers tried to adapt to the attack, but they couldn't adapt to weapons they couldn't detect. Their sensors showed no enemy ships, no energy signatures, no incoming projectiles. Their fleet was being destroyed by forces that seemed to come from empty space. All units, came Sarah's voice over the human fleet's communication system. Initiate Phase 3, Reality Anchor Deployment. What happened next was beyond anything the council delegates could have imagined. The human ships began to manipulate space and time itself. They created pockets of altered physics where the laws of nature worked differently. Inside these reality anchors, the Devourer's adaptive technology simply stopped functioning. Ships that had been invulnerable to every weapon in the galaxy suddenly found themselves vulnerable to basic kinetic force. Their advanced hulls became as fragile as paper. Their powerful shields became useless decorations. Impossible, the lead Devourer creature broadcast, its voice now showing something that might have been fear. Our adaptive matrices are failing. We cannot analyze the attack vectors. That's because there are no attack vectors, Sarah replied, her fleet still invisible to enemy sensors. We're not attacking you with weapons. We're changing the fundamental nature of reality around you. The Devourer fleet tried to retreat, but the human ships had surrounded them completely in dimensional space. Every escape route was blocked by vessels that couldn't be detected or targeted. How are you doing this? The Devourer creature demanded. What technology are you using? Technology you can't steal because it doesn't exist in your universe. Sarah answered. We're fighting you from a dimension. You can't enter and using principles your collective consciousness can't comprehend. The battle continued for 3 more hours, but the outcome was never in doubt. The Devourers had built their entire strategy around adapting to conventional weapons and tactics. They had no defense against enemies who could rewrite the laws of physics or attack from parallel dimensions. One by one, the dark ships were destroyed or captured. Some were compressed into gravitational singularities. Others were dissolved at the molecular level by quantum disintegration beams. A few were simply transported to empty regions of space where they would drift harmlessly for eternity. But the most remarkable part of the battle came near the end, when the human fleet began to do something unprecedented. Instead of simply destroying the remaining Devourer ships, they began to reverse the damage the enemy had caused. Phase 4. Initiated, Sarah announced. Molecular reconstruction and life restoration protocols are now active. The human ships began to rebuild everything the Devourers had destroyed. Broken council vessels were reconstructed from their scattered atoms. Dead crew members were restored to life using genetic templates stored in quantum memory banks. Even entire planets that had been stripped bare were reformed and repopulated. From the council observation station, the watching delegates saw their destroyed fleet slowly materialize in perfect condition. Ships that had been vaporized in the battle at Helix Nebula appeared in space as if they had never been damaged. This is impossible, Admiral Sectuth whispered. They're bringing back the dead. They're reversing destruction itself. Not reversing, corrected Ambassador Luxara, her light pulsing with amazement. Rebuilding. They're rebuilding everything from nothing. On the bridge of the Prometheus, Sarah watched the reconstruction process with satisfaction. How many council vessels have been restored, Commander Torres? All of them, Admiral. 9,437 ships, exactly as they were before the first battle. All crew members have been restored to life with their memories intact up to the moment of their destruction. And the Devourer fleet? Completely neutralized. 58,712 vessels destroyed or captured. No survivors, but we've extracted their entire database of consumed civilizations. The reconstruction protocols can restore every species they've assimilated over the past 1,000 years. Sarah nodded with grim satisfaction. Signal the council fleet. Tell them they can return to normal space. The threat has been eliminated. As the human fleet emerged from dimensional space, they appeared around the remnants of the Devourer Armada. like avenging angels made of metal and light. The enemy ships that remained were dead hulks drifting in space, their adaptive technology permanently disabled. "Admiral Chun," came a transmission from the Council Command Station. "This is Speaker Veltar. On behalf of the entire Galactic Council, how do we even begin to thank you?" Sarah's voice came back calm and steady. "No thanks necessary. Speaker Veltar, we did what we came here to do. The galaxy is safe. But the reconstruction, the restoration of our lost ships and people, how is such a thing possible? When you can manipulate matter and energy at the quantum level," Sarah replied, "death becomes just another engineering problem to solve." The human fleet began to form up for departure, their mission complete. The crisis that had threatened to destroy galactic civilization had been ended in a single battle that most observers couldn't even see. "Admiral," called Commander Torres. "All systems report mission successful. Ready to return to dimensional space for the journey home." Sarah looked out at the restored Council fleet and the debris of the Devourer Armada. "Not yet, Commander. There's still one more thing we need to do." She activated the communication system one more time. "This is Admiral Chun to all Council vessels. You might want to gather your representatives for one final meeting. There are some things about galactic security that we need to discuss." The battle was over, but Sarah knew that the real conversation was just beginning. The galaxy had seen what humanity could do when fully committed to a fight. Now it was time to talk about what came next. 1 week after the Silent War, the Grand Assembly Hall looked different than it ever had before. The same crystal dome stretched overhead, and the same curved seating arrangements held representatives from all 47 member species. But the atmosphere was completely changed. Where once there had been casual chatter and easy laughter, now there was respectful silence. Where delegates had once lounged in their seats with comfortable arrogance, now they sat straight with careful attention. Every eye in the hall was focused on the human section, where Admiral Sarah Chun sat quietly among her small delegation. "Speaker." Veltar called the session to order with more formality than anyone had ever seen from him. His forearms moved with precise ceremony as he addressed the assembly. "Council members," Veltar began, "we gather today to discuss the new realities of galactic security following the defeat of the Devourer threat. The floor recognizes Admiral Sarah Chun of Earth." Sarah stood and walked to the center platform, just as she had done twice before in this same hall. But this time, her footsteps echoed in complete silence. No one whispered, no one laughed. No one even seemed to breathe as she took her position. "Honored delegates," Sarah began, "I want to start by addressing the questions that I know are on everyone's minds. How long has humanity possessed these capabilities? Why did we hide them? And what does this mean for the future of the Galactic Council?" She paused and looked around the hall at faces that showed mixtures of awe, fear, gratitude, and uncertainty. To answer the first question, Sarah continued, "Humanity has been developing these technologies for over 400 years. We began serious research into dimensional warfare and quantum manipulation shortly after we achieved faster-than-light travel." Admiral Sektuth raised a wing to speak. "Admiral Chun, our records show that humanity achieved FTL travel only 60 years ago. How is it possible that you've been researching these technologies for 4 centuries? Sarah nodded, having expected this question. "Because humanity achieved FTL travel over 500 years ago, not 60. What you detected 60 years ago was our first contact mission to this galaxy. We had been exploring other galaxies for centuries before we ever made contact with the Council." The implications of this statement hit the assembly like a physical blow. Several delegates stood up in shock. Others began talking rapidly to their neighbors. The Stellar Federation representatives clicked their legs so quickly it sounded like rattling metal. "You've been watching us for centuries?" asked Ambassador Luxara, her light flickering with confusion and concern. "Not watching," Sarah corrected. "Protecting, there's a difference. We've been monitoring this galaxy for signs of threats that the local civilizations couldn't handle alone. The Devourers were exactly the kind of enemy we were prepared to face. War Marshal Cricksack stood up, his massive form trembling with emotion. You let us struggle with our wars, our conflicts, our territorial disputes while you had the power. To stop all of it, Sarah's expression became more serious. Marshal Cricksack, what you call struggles and conflicts, we call growth and learning. Every civilization must find its own path to maturity. We intervene only when faced with threats to existence itself. She activated her datapad, and holographic displays filled the air above the platform. But these images were different from anything she had shown before. They showed a vast network of galaxies connected by streams of light. This is the reality of human civilization, Sarah explained. We are present in over 300 galaxies. We monitor thousands of developing civilizations. And we have faced and defeated dozens of extinction-level threats over the past millennium. The scale of what she was describing was beyond anything the Council had imagined. They had thought of themselves as one of the great civilizations of the universe. Now they were learning that they were essentially children being watched over by adults they had never known existed. The second question, Sarah continued, is why we hid our capabilities. The answer is simple, because we learned long ago that revealing overwhelming power too early prevents civilizations from developing their own strength. Senator Thylix from the Krillian Empire spoke up, his scales showing deep blue colors that meant serious thought. You're saying that if you had revealed your true capabilities from the beginning, we would have become dependent on you instead of growing on our own? Exactly, Sarah confirmed. Look at what this council has accomplished. You've created an alliance between dozens of species with completely different biologies, cultures, and beliefs. You've established trade networks, diplomatic protocols, and mutual defense agreements. You did all of this yourselves, through your own efforts and wisdom. She gestured toward the assembled delegates. If we had arrived 5 years ago with our full capabilities revealed, would you have worked so hard to build these relationships? Would you have developed your own technologies and strategies? Or would you have simply asked the powerful humans to solve all your problems for you? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Around the hall, delegates began to understand what Sarah was really saying. Humanity had hidden their strength not out of deception, but out of respect for the potential of others. But surely, said Commander Zefta, there were times when revealing your power could have prevented suffering. Wars could have been stopped. Lives could have been saved. Sarah's expression became sad and distant. Commander, that is the most difficult part of being a guardian civilization. We have watched conflicts that we could have ended in minutes. We have seen suffering that we could have prevented with a single ship. But we have also learned that civilizations which never face challenges never develop the wisdom to handle power responsibly. The holographic display changed to show historical images from various council species. Wars, natural disasters, political upheavals, and technological breakthroughs, moments of struggle and moments of triumph. Every species in this hall has faced moments that seemed hopeless, Sarah continued. The Vorthok Civil War that lasted 3 centuries. The Krillian Plague that killed half your population. The Etherian Schism that split your people into opposing factions. You survived all of these challenges and became stronger because of them. Admiral Sectith nodded slowly, his silver feathers rustling with understanding. And if you had intervened, we would never have learned to overcome our own problems. Precisely, Sarah replied. The strength of a civilization is not measured by its weapons or technology. It's measured by its ability to face adversity and emerge stronger. The Council has proven its strength many times over. Speaker Veltar raised a hand for attention. Admiral Chun, this brings us to the third question. What does this mean for the future of the Council? Will humanity now take over our defense? Will we become a protectorate of Earth? Sarah shook her head firmly. Absolutely not. The Galactic Council will continue to operate exactly as it has. You will defend yourselves, govern yourselves, and make your own decisions about your future. Earth will not interfere in your internal affairs or impose our will on your civilizations. But what about threats like the Devourers? Asked War Marshal Cricksack. How do we know when we're facing something beyond our capabilities? You'll know, Sarah replied with a slight smile. And when that time comes, we'll be here. Think of humanity as a backup system. We're the safety net that catches you when you fall from heights you couldn't have imagined climbing. The hall fell into thoughtful silence as the delegates absorbed this information. They were learning that their place in the universe was both smaller and larger than they had thought. Smaller because they were part of a vast community of civilizations they had never known existed. Larger because they had proven themselves worthy of protection and respect from beings with godlike power. Ambassador Luxara floated higher than usual as she spoke. Admiral Chun, may I ask about the restored ships and the people who were brought back to life? How is such a thing possible? Sarah's expression became more technical as she explained. When you understand matter and energy at the quantum level, death is simply a change of state. Every atom in a person's body retains quantum imprints of its previous configurations. With sufficient technology, those imprints can be read and restored, but their memories, their personalities, started Senator Thylix. Consciousness exists in quantum patterns that persist even after biological death, Sarah continued. Those patterns can be recovered and reconstructed. The people we restored are exactly who they were before, with all their memories and experiences intact. The implications were staggering. If humanity could bring back the dead, if they could rebuild entire civilizations from nothing, what else could they do? What other powers were they keeping hidden? As if reading their thoughts, Sarah addressed their unspoken concerns. I know what you're thinking. If we can do all of this, what else are we hiding? What other capabilities do we possess? The answer is that our technological abilities are limited only by our imagination and our sense of responsibility. She walked to the edge of the platform and looked out at the assembled delegates. We could reshape this galaxy according to our desires. We could eliminate poverty, disease, and conflict with a few simple commands. We could make every world a paradise and every species immortal. But we don't, because we understand something that took us thousands of years to learn. The hall was completely silent as everyone waited for her to continue. The most important power, Sarah said quietly, is the power to choose not to use your power. True strength is not in the ability to control others, but in the wisdom to let them control themselves. War Marshal Cricksack stood up again, but this time his posture was one of respect rather than challenge. Admiral Chun, I owe you an apology. 3 months ago, I mocked your people as primitive and weak. I see now that you allowed us to believe that because it served a greater purpose. No apology needed, Marshal, Sarah replied. Your reaction was exactly what we expected and hoped for. It proved that you were thinking independently and making your own judgments. That's the sign of a healthy civilization. Speaker Veltar stood up and addressed the assembly. I believe I speak for the entire council when I say that we are grateful beyond words for humanity's protection. But I must ask the question that is on everyone's mind: what happens now? How do we move forward with this new understanding? Sarah smiled for the first time since entering the hall. You move forward exactly as you have been. You continue to build your alliance, develop your technologies, and solve your problems. The only difference is that you now know you're not alone in the universe. She activated her datapad one final time. The holographic display showed the human fleet, but now it was dispersed throughout the galaxy. Single ships stationed at the edges of council space, watching and waiting. Humanity will maintain a small monitoring presence in this galaxy, Sarah explained. Not to control or interfere, but to watch for threats that might be beyond your current capabilities. Think of us as your galactic immune system. Most of the time, you'll never know we're there. But when something truly dangerous appears, we'll be ready. And if we need help with smaller problems, ask Commander Zefta. Border disputes, trade conflicts, resource shortages, those are your problems to solve, Sarah replied firmly but kindly. We'll provide advice if asked, but only if asked. The strength you've built over centuries comes from facing challenges yourselves. We won't take that away from you by solving every minor difficulty. Admiral Sectith raised a wing. What about the technologies you've shown us? Will we ever have access to dimensional warfare and quantum manipulation? Sarah considered this carefully before answering. Some technologies will be shared when you're ready for them. Others may never be shared because they're too dangerous for any single civilization to possess. And some you'll develop on your own, probably in ways we never thought of. She paused and looked around the hall again. But I will say this. The fact that you're asking these questions instead of demanding these technologies tells me that you're already on the right path to handling them responsibly. The session continued for several more hours as delegates asked detailed questions about galactic security, human capabilities, and future cooperation. But the most important points had already been established. Humanity would protect but not control. They would watch but not interfere. They would help but not replace the efforts of others. As the meeting drew to a close, Speaker Veltar made a formal announcement. The Galactic Council hereby recognizes the Earth Strategic Defense Fleet as the primary peacekeeping force for threats beyond our current capabilities. We also establish humanity as our guardian civilization with the understanding that this role comes with great responsibility and greater restraint. Sarah nodded formally. Earth accepts this responsibility. We pledge to protect this galaxy and its civilizations, while respecting their right to grow and develop according to their own choices. As the delegates began to file out of the hall, the atmosphere was one of quiet satisfaction mixed with awe. They had learned that they were part of something much larger than they had ever imagined. But they had also learned that they were valued and respected members of a community that spanned multiple galaxies. War Marshal Krikzak approached Sarah as she gathered her materials. Admiral Chun, I have one final question. When you first presented your military capabilities 3 months ago, did you know then that the Devourers were coming? Sarah looked at the massive Zephyrian with an expression that might have been amused. Marshal, we've been tracking the Devourers for over 50 years. We knew exactly when they would arrive and exactly what it would take to defeat them. The only question was whether this galaxy's civilizations were worth saving. And your conclusion? Sarah smiled as she looked around the nearly empty hall. The Galactic Council is one of the most remarkable political achievements we've encountered. In 3 centuries of exploration, species with completely different biologies and cultures working together for the common good, it was definitely worth saving. As the last delegates left the hall, Sarah stood alone on the platform where she had been mocked just months earlier. The beings who had laughed at human primitive weapons now understood that humanity's greatest weapon had never been their technology. It had been their wisdom to use that technology responsibly. The galaxy was safe, not because humanity was strong, but because they were wise enough to know when and how to use their strength. And in the dark spaces between stars, 50 ships continued their silent patrol, watching over civilizations that were free to grow and develop because someone else was strong enough to let them.
The chamber was massive beyond human comprehension. It floated in the void of space, orbiting a world that existed only for peace and diplomacy. Inside, representatives from 47 different alien species sat in their designated sections. Each section was designed for the specific needs of that species. Some sat in water-filled tanks, others floated in gas clouds. A few existed as pure energy, contained in special fields. Ambassador Sarah Chen stood in the center of it all. She was alone. Her people had told her she could bring advisors, but she refused. If humanity was going to be judged, she would face that judgment by herself. She wore a simple black suit, the kind diplomats on Earth had worn for centuries. Her dark hair was pulled back tight. Her face showed no emotion, though her heart was racing. Above her, the council leader spoke. His name was impossible for human tongues to pronounce, so everyone called him First Speaker. He was a Zathan, a species that looked like floating crystals that constantly shifted colors. When he spoke, his words came through translators that every species wore or had implanted. We gather today for a matter of grave importance, First Speaker said. His voice was calm, almost sad. Humanity has been part of our Galactic Council for 23 standard years. In that short time, they have caused more disruption than any species in the past 1,000 years. Sarah felt anger rise in her chest, but she forced it down. She had practiced for this moment. Show nothing. Give them nothing. The charges are clear. First speaker continued. First, humanity has shared advanced technology with primitive species, violating our most sacred law of non-interference. Second, they refuse to fully disarm their military vessels despite treaty agreements. Third, their cultural exports have caused social disruption across 17 member worlds. Around the chamber, alien representatives made sounds of agreement. Some clicked their mandibles. Others pulsed with light. A few released chemical signals that Sarah's translator interpreted as approval. A representative from the Korsian Empire stood. The Korsian looked like enormous crabs covered in metallic shells. "We have evidence," the representative said. "Human ships were detected in the Yala system. That system is protected. The species there are still in their industrial age. Yet humans gave them medical technology that has disrupted their natural development." Sarah wanted to scream. The Yala were dying from a plague. Humanity had saved 3 billion lives, but she stayed quiet. It wasn't time yet. Another representative spoke, this one from the Valerian Collective. Valerians were telepathic beings that looked like tall, thin humanoids with smooth gray skin. Human entertainment programs have infiltrated our youth networks. These programs promote violence, chaotic thinking, and individual desire over collective good. Our children now question authority. They want adventure. They reject the peace we have built. More sounds of agreement echoed through the chamber. A third voice joined in. This one belonged to a Matherian, a species of energy beings who rarely spoke in council. Humans are dangerous because they cannot be predicted. Every other species in this council thinks in patterns we understand. Humans think in chaos. They plan for disasters that may never happen. They create weapons they hope never to use. They are a warrior species pretending to be civilized. Sarah's jaw tightened. 23 years. That's all humanity had been given. 23 years to prove themselves among species that had been spacefaring for thousands of years. They had made mistakes, yes, but they had also contributed. Human doctors had developed new medical techniques. Human engineers had improved ship designs. Human artists had created works that moved even alien hearts. None of that seemed to matter now. First speaker's crystals dimmed, a sign of regret among his people. "Ambassador Chen, you may now speak in humanity's defense." Sarah took a deep breath. This was it. She activated her own holographic display showing images and data. "Honorable council members," she began, her voice steady and clear. "You call us chaotic. We call it adaptability. You call us violent. We call it the ability to protect ourselves and others. You call us unpredictable. We call it creative thinking." She changed the display to show Earth. "We come from a death world. That's what your own scientists labeled it. High gravity, extreme weather, thousands of predator species, diseases that evolve faster than most species in this galaxy can adapt. We didn't evolve in paradise. We evolved in hell. And we survived." Some of the council members shifted uncomfortably. It was true. Earth was classified as one of the most dangerous habitable worlds ever discovered. Most species would die within days there without protection. "You say we gave technology to the Yala?" Sarah continued. "Yes, we did. Because they were dying. Because we have a saying on Earth. With great power comes great responsibility. We had the power to save them. So we did." "Is compassion now a crime?" "The law is the law," a council member called out. "If we make exceptions, chaos follows." Sarah spun to face the speaker. "Your laws were written by species who never knew true hardship, who never faced extinction, who never had to fight for every scrap of survival. You've had peace for so long that you've forgotten why strength matters. Are you threatening us?" another representative demanded. "No," Sarah said firmly. "I'm trying to make you understand. Humanity hasn't been trying to disrupt your peace. We've been trying to strengthen it. Because we know something you've forgotten. Peace isn't the natural state of the universe. Peace is something you have to protect. You have to be ready to defend it. First speaker's colors rippled. We have defended peace for millennia without becoming warriors. Have you? Sarah asked. Or have you just been lucky? You've had no major threats, no invasions from outside the known galaxy, no existential dangers. You've lived in a bubble of safety and called it enlightenment. The chamber erupted in angry sounds. Sarah had crossed a line, but she didn't care anymore. She could see it in their faces, their energy patterns, their body language. They had already decided. This trial was just for show. First speaker raised a crystalline limb, calling for silence. Ambassador Chen, your passion is noted. But passion is part of the problem. Humanity feels too much, acts too quickly, thinks too little about consequences. We think plenty about consequences, Sarah shot back. That's why we prepare. That's why we train. That's why we study war, even in times of peace. Not because we want war, but because we want to prevent it. We remember our own history, the times we weren't prepared, the times people died because we were too slow, too weak, too naive. She pulled up historical records from Earth. Wars, disasters, near-extinction events. We came from this. We survived this. And we learned from it. Every other species in this council evolved on easy worlds. You had time to develop philosophy before you needed weapons. You could afford to be peaceful. We couldn't. And that doesn't make us evil. It makes us realistic. The Valerian representative spoke again, her telepathic voice calm. That is precisely why you must leave. Your realism, as you call it, is poison to the peace we have built. You make others doubt. You make them fear. You remind them that the universe can be cruel. We don't need that reminder. Sarah felt her last hope dying. So you'd rather live in a comfortable lie than face an uncomfortable truth? We would rather live in peace, first speaker said. The vote will now commence. All those in favor of expelling humanity from the Galactic Council and restricting them to their home system, signify now. Around the chamber, lights began to glow. Each species had their own way of voting. The Zothan glowed blue. The Kortian raised their claws. The Valerians released pulses of telepathic agreement. Sarah watched as the votes came in. 39 glowing lights. 39 species saying humanity didn't belong. Only 8 lights remained dark. 8 species who voted against the expulsion. Sarah noted them. She would remember those 8. They were the only ones who gave humanity a chance. The vote is decided, first speaker announced. Humanity is hereby expelled from the Galactic Council. All human vessels, stations, and personnel must return to the Sol system within 90 standard days. A quantum barrier will be erected around your home system. You will not be able to leave. No one will be able to enter. You will be isolated until such time as your species evolves beyond its violent nature. Sarah felt numb. She had expected this, but hearing it made it real. How long? She asked quietly. That is up to you, first speaker said. When your species has learned true peace, when you have abandoned your weapons and your warrior ways, you may petition for readmission. We estimate it will take at least 500 years. Perhaps 1,500 years. Entire generations would live and die in isolation. Humanity would be cut off from the greater galaxy, from all the wonders and knowledge out there. They would be prisoners in their own solar system. Sarah stood tall. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing her break. We'll return, she said, her voice cold and hard. Maybe not in 500 years. Maybe not in 1,000. But we'll be back. And when we return, you'll see what humanity really is. Threats will not help your case, a council member said. That's not a threat, Sarah replied. It's a promise. You're making a mistake. One day you'll need us. You'll face something you can't handle with philosophy and committee meetings. And when that day comes, you'll remember that you threw away the one species that could have helped you. First speaker's colors dimmed further. This council session is concluded. Ambassador Chen, you have 90 days. Sarah didn't bow, didn't show any sign of respect. She simply turned and walked toward the exit. Behind her, she could hear the council members talking, probably congratulating themselves on restoring order. They didn't understand. They thought humanity was the problem. They would learn. Outside the chamber, Sarah's security team waited. They were all human, all wearing the dark blue uniforms of Earth's diplomatic corps. One of them, a young man named Marcus, stepped forward. "Ma'am, what happened?" Sarah kept walking. "We're going home, Marcus, all of us. Every human in galactic space. We have 90 days to evacuate everything." "They actually did it?" another guard asked, a woman named Yuki. "They actually kicked us out?" 39-8, Sarah confirmed. "Start spreading the word. Contact every human ship, every colony, every outpost. We're leaving." As they walked to their ship, Sarah looked back at the massive council chamber one last time. It hung there in space, beautiful and serene, a symbol of galactic unity and peace. She felt a mix of anger and sadness. Humanity had tried so hard to fit in. But maybe that was the problem. Maybe they were never meant to fit in. The journey back to Earth took 3 weeks. During that time, Sarah wrote her final report. She detailed everything that had happened, everything that had been said. She made recommendations for what humanity should do next. At the top of the list, survive, adapt, grow stronger. And remember, when she finally reached Earth, the news had already spread. People were angry. Some wanted to fight back, to refuse the expulsion. But the government had already decided they would comply. They would leave peacefully, not because they were afraid, but because fighting now would only prove the council right. The evacuation was the largest operation in human history. Thousands of ships moved through space, carrying people and equipment back to Sol. Human colonies outside the solar system were abandoned. Advanced research stations were dismantled. Trade agreements were dissolved. Within 87 days, every human was back in the Sol system. On day 90, the barrier went up. Sarah watched from a station orbiting Mars as the quantum field spread across the edge of their solar system. It looked like a soap bubble, thin and shimmering, but it was stronger than any physical wall. Nothing could pass through it. Not ships, not signals, not even light beyond a certain frequency. Humanity was alone. Sarah thought about her final words to the council. She had promised they would return. As she watched the barrier complete its formation, sealing them in, she made that promise again. To herself, to her species, to every human who would come after. They would survive. They would adapt. They would grow. And one day, when the galaxy least expected it, humanity would return, not as supplicants begging for acceptance, but as something more, something stronger. The council thought 500 years would change humanity. They were right. But not in the way they imagined. The galaxy celebrated for exactly 1 month after humanity's expulsion. There were parties on diplomatic worlds. Council members gave speeches about a new era of peace and stability. Cultural programs were launched to promote true civilization and proper thinking. The message was clear. Order had been restored. But celebrations fade, and life goes on. 50 years after the expulsion, the first cracks began to show. Not in the barrier around Sol, which remained perfect and impenetrable. The cracks appeared in galactic society itself. On the Valerian homeworld, a group of young artists staged a protest. They wanted to perform music that didn't follow traditional patterns. Music that was chaotic and emotional, music that sounded suspiciously human. The collective's elders shut down the performance and sent the artists for re-education. But the recording spread anyway, passed secretly through underground networks. On a Corsian colony world, engineers proposed a new ship design that violated standard conventions. It was asymmetrical and unpredictable, designed to confuse enemies rather than intimidate them. The proposal was rejected immediately. "We don't build ships that way," the review board said. "It's not proper." But the engineer kept the designs, wondering why proper had to mean boring. These were small things, tiny rebellions. Most people in the galaxy didn't even notice them. Life continued as it had for centuries. Trade routes ran on schedule. Disputes were settled through proper channels. Art and science advanced in predictable, comfortable ways. The council met regularly, discussing important matters with careful deliberation. They managed resources. They mediated conflicts. They maintained the peace. And if that peace felt a little stale, a little hollow, well, that was the price of civilization. 100 years passed. Then 200. The younger species who had been alive during humanity's trial died off. New generations took their place, generations who only knew humans as cautionary tales. Stories parents told children about the violent species who had to be locked away for everyone's safety. Some of the older council members occasionally wondered about the humans. Were they still alive behind that barrier? Had they destroyed themselves in some violent conflict? A few suggested checking, but first speaker, now ancient even by Zathan standards, always said the same thing. Let them be. If they have learned peace, they will petition for release. If they have not, we are safer with them contained. Nobody questioned this logic. Nobody suggested that maybe, just maybe, the barrier was a mistake. 300 years after the expulsion, a Caesarian scientist named Velthra began studying ancient records. She was young, barely 50 years old, born long after humans had vanished from galactic society. Her research focused on military history, a field considered quaint and outdated. After all, the galaxy hadn't seen a real war in over 1,000 years. Velthra found something interesting in the archives. Reports from the brief time humans had been part of the council. She read about their tactical simulations, their war games, their obsessive study of conflict. She found human entertainment programs that the Valerians had banned, stories about soldiers and battles and survival against impossible odds. They were so strange, she told her mentor, an elderly Caesarian named Tolmar. They thought about violence constantly, but they weren't violent. They prepared for wars they didn't want to fight. They honored warriors but mourned every death. I don't understand them. Tolmar, who had been alive during the human era, chittered softly. No one understood them. That was the problem. They didn't fit our patterns. They scared us, so we removed them. Was that the right choice? Velthra asked. Tolmar didn't answer. He just looked toward the star charts, toward the region where Sul existed behind its barrier, and said nothing. 400 years passed. The galaxy settled into comfortable routines. Innovation slowed to a crawl. Why invent new things when the old ways worked perfectly well? Why take risks when safety was guaranteed? Why question anything when everything ran smoothly? A few voices called for change. They were ignored or silenced. The council had perfected peace, and perfection needed no improvement. But behind the barrier, in the prison of Sol, a very different story was unfolding. The first 50 years were the hardest. Humanity had been cut off from alien technology, alien resources, alien knowledge. They had only what they could build themselves. Some people panicked. Some fell into despair. Riots broke out on Earth and Mars. People demanded that their government do something, break through the barrier, force the council to take them back. But slowly, humanity adapted. They always did. Scientists and engineers worked day and night, reverse engineering the alien technology they had acquired before the expulsion. They couldn't replicate everything, but they learned principles. They found new approaches, human creativity, unconstrained by alien rules and expectations, began to flourish. We don't have to do it their way, a young physicist named Dr. Sarah Okonkwo declared at a conference on Luna. The council species all use quantum drives for FTL travel. But that's not the only way. Einstein said space and time are connected. What if we don't move through space? What if we fold it? Other scientists called her crazy. The mathematics didn't work. The energy requirements were impossible. But Okonkwo kept trying, and eventually she found a solution. It required massive computational power and an understanding of dimensional physics that no alien species had achieved. But humans, with their chaos and creativity, made it work. 100 years after the expulsion, the first human ship folded space. It didn't travel faster than light. It made light irrelevant. The ship went from Mars to Jupiter in minutes, not hours. The technology was crude and dangerous, but it was theirs. Meanwhile, humanity faced other challenges. Resources were limited. The Sol system was rich but finite. Conflicts arose over mining rights, living space, and ideology. Wars broke out, small ones at first, then larger. The asteroid belt became a battlefield. Earth and Mars almost destroyed each other over water rights. For a terrible decade, it looked like humanity would do exactly what the Council had predicted, destroy itself in violence. But something unexpected happened. The survivors of these conflicts looked at the ruins they had created and made a choice, not to give up violence that was impossible for a species forged in Earth's crucible. Instead, they chose to direct it, channel it, control it. The Human Confederacy was formed 200 years after the expulsion. It wasn't a single government, but a loose alliance of dozens of factions, colonies, and cultural groups. They didn't always agree. They argued constantly, but they had rules about those arguments, ways to settle disputes without destroying each other. We are humanity, the founding document declared. We are diverse, chaotic, and passionate. We are warriors and poets, scientists and dreamers. We do not fit simple patterns because we are not simple beings, and that is our strength. The Confederacy didn't try to make humans peaceful. Instead, it created structures for their energy. Competitive games replaced some wars. Virtual combat replaced others. When conflicts couldn't be resolved peacefully, the Confederacy had protocols, making sure fights stayed limited and survivors were treated with honor. It wasn't perfect. People still died. Mistakes were still made, but humanity survived. As centuries passed, humans spread throughout the Sol system. They built habitats in the asteroid belt. They terraformed parts of Mars. They created floating cities in Venus's upper atmosphere. They established research stations on the moons of Jupiter and Saturn. They even sent long-range probes to the edges of the barrier, studying it, learning from it. Some humans changed themselves. Genetic engineering became common, creating variations adapted to different environments. Some had enhanced muscles for high gravity. Others had improved lungs for thin atmospheres. A few went further, merging with machines or altering their brains to process information faster. By year 400, humanity was no longer a single species, but a family of related subspecies. And they all remembered the council, the betrayal, the isolation. Some wanted revenge. Others wanted to prove themselves. A few didn't care about the council at all, focused on survival and growth. But they all knew one thing. Eventually, the barrier would come down. One way or another. 500 years after the expulsion, Velthra was now chief historian of the Galactic Council. She had spent her life studying the past, trying to understand the patterns of history, and she had noticed something troubling. The galaxy is stagnant, she reported to the current first speaker, a Valerian named Sorchen. In the past 500 years, we have made almost no significant advances in technology, art, or philosophy. We are stable, but we are not growing. Sorchen's telepathic presence felt calm, unconcerned. Stability is growth. Peace is progress. Is it? Velthra challenged. I've studied the records from before humanity's expulsion. In those 23 years, we saw more innovation than in the previous century. Human ideas pushed us. Their chaos made us think differently. Their chaos was dangerous, Sorchen replied. We removed the danger. We removed the spark, Velthra countered. And now we're dying. Not quickly, not violently. We're dying of boredom and complacency. Other council members dismissed her concerns. The galaxy was fine. Everything was under control. Velthra's worries were noted and filed away, just like countless other reports that challenged the status quo. Then came the first anomaly. A science vessel near the edge of council space detected something impossible. A ship that wasn't using quantum drives. A ship that appeared on sensors, then vanished, then appeared somewhere else entirely. The crew thought their equipment was malfunctioning. More sightings followed. Strange vessels at the edges of known space, moving in ways that violated every law of physics the council knew. They never approached inhabited worlds, never communicated, just appeared, observed, and vanished. Pirates? One council member suggested. A new species? Another proposed. Velthra looked at the data and felt a chill run through her exoskeleton. She had seen similar signatures before, in ancient records from 500 years ago. Human ship designs from before the expulsion, but evolved, advanced, impossible. She went to first speaker Sorchen with her theory. The humans are outside the barrier. Impossible, Sorchen said. The barrier is perfect. Nothing can pass through it. Then how do you explain these readings? Sensor errors, space anomalies, anything but humans. They are contained. They must be. But Velthra wasn't convinced. She started tracking the sightings, plotting them on star charts. There was a pattern. The ships were surveying, mapping, learning, and they were getting closer to inhabited space. She tried to warn the council, but they wouldn't listen. The barrier had held for 500 years. It would hold forever. Humans were a solved problem, a footnote in history. The galaxy had moved on. Then the Ravagers arrived. They came from dark space, from the void between galaxies where nothing should exist. The first world that detected them was a mining colony on the edge of council territory. The colony sent a distress signal, then went silent. A council patrol arrived 3 days later and found nothing. The planet was gone. Not destroyed. Not damaged. Gone, consumed down to the core, leaving only debris and dust. More colonies vanished. More worlds disappeared. The council scrambled to respond, sending fleets to investigate. They found the enemy. Massive organic ships, millions of them moving like a swarm. They didn't communicate. Didn't negotiate. Just consumed everything in their path. The council fleets engaged the Ravagers in battle. It went poorly. The alien swarm adapted to every weapon, every tactic. Ships that should have destroyed them barely slowed them down. Strategies that had worked in simulations failed in practice. The Ravagers kept coming. Panic spread through the galaxy. Refugees fled core ward, abandoning their homes. The council declared a state of emergency. They mobilized every ship, every resource. And still the Ravagers advanced. In her office, Velthra watched the casualty reports pile up. Billions dead, dozens of worlds lost. The council's carefully maintained peace was burning and no one knew how to stop it. She pulled up old records again. Human military theory, human tactical doctrine, human entertainment programs about impossible wars and unlikely victories. She read one quote from a human general, from Earth's own violent history. No battle plan survives contact with the enemy. The council had battle plans. Perfect plans. Plans created through careful analysis and committee decisions. And every single one was failing because the Ravagers didn't follow the rules. But humans had never followed the rules either. Velthra made a decision that would change everything. She went to the council with a proposal so radical, so desperate, that she knew it would be rejected. Unless things got worse. Things got worse. Another 20 worlds fell. The Ravagers' advance accelerated. They were learning, evolving, becoming more efficient. At the current rate, they would reach the core systems within a standard year. After that, the galaxy would fall. Finally, with no other options left, the council voted. The decision was close, much closer than it had been 500 years before. But it passed. They would ask the humans for help. The war room deep inside the council station was filled with holographic displays showing the advance of the Ravagers. Red markers indicated lost worlds. Yellow showed worlds under attack. Blue represented the remaining council fleets. The blue markers were disappearing faster than new ones could be deployed. Admiral Kreshitar of the Korshan Imperial Fleet stared at the displays with growing despair. He had commanded fleets for 200 years, fought in border skirmishes and pirate raids. He had studied every military conflict in recorded galactic history. None of it prepared him for this. They adapt too quickly, he told the assembled commanders. We hit them with plasma weapons, they develop resistance within hours. We try kinetic strikes, they disperse and reform. We attempt flanking maneuvers, they predict and counter. It's like fighting an opponent who learns from every mistake instantly. A Valerian tactical officer pulsed agreement through the telepathic network. Our simulations show that at their current rate of adaptation, no conventional weapon will remain effective within 3 months. They are becoming immune to everything we have. What about unconventional weapons? Someone asked. Kreshitar's mandibles clicked in frustration. We don't have unconventional weapons. We have protocols, standards, approved methods of engagement. Everything we do follows doctrine established over millennia. Then perhaps it's time to abandon doctrine, Velthra said from the back of the room. All eyes turned to her. She was just a historian, not a military officer. She had no business being in the war room at all except that her research had become suddenly relevant. Abandon doctrine? Kreshitar repeated, his voice incredulous. Young one, doctrine exists because it works. It has been refined over thousands of years of experience. Experience fighting pirates and border disputes, Velthra countered. When was the last time the council faced an existential threat? When did you last fight an enemy that wanted to consume everything? The room fell silent. The answer was never. In all of recorded galactic history, the council had never faced total war. They had never needed to. I've been studying human military history, Velthra continued. They had a concept called total war. Conflicts where entire civilizations mobilized every resource, where there were no rules, no limits, where survival was the only goal. Barbaric, a Valerian commander said. Effective, Velthra replied. Humans fought wars that should have destroyed them. Wars with no clear victory condition, against enemies that seemed invincible. And they won. Not by being stronger or having better technology, but by being unpredictable, by thinking creatively. by refusing to accept that defeat was inevitable. Kreshtar studied her for a long moment. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting we need help. Help from the only species in known space that actually understands how to fight this kind of war. The room erupted in argument. Half the commanders rejected the idea immediately. The humans were locked away for good reason. They were dangerous, unpredictable. Bringing them back would be admitting the council had made a mistake. But the other half looked at the displays, at the advancing red markers, and wondered if pride was worth dying for. The debate raged for 3 days. During those 3 days, 5 more worlds fell to the Ravagers. 12 billion sentient beings were consumed. Council fleets attempted 6 different engagement strategies, all failures. The military was running out of ideas. On the 4th day, First Speaker Sorchen made an announcement. The Council has voted. We will send a diplomatic mission to the Sol system. We will ask humanity for assistance in defending the galaxy against the Ravager threat. The vote had been 31 in favor, 16 against. Much closer than the vote to expel humanity had been. Some council members still believed they could win without help. Others believed humanity would refuse and it would be a wasted effort. But enough were desperate enough to try. Velthra volunteered to lead the mission immediately. She expected to be rejected, too young and inexperienced for such an important task. Instead, Sorchen approved her request. You studied them, the first speaker said. You understand them better than anyone alive in the council. And you were not part of the decision to expel them. Perhaps that matters. A fleet of 12 ships was assembled, not warships but diplomatic vessels. Though they carried weapons for defense, no one knew what they would find at Sol. Were the humans still alive? Had they descended into barbarism? Had they evolved beyond violence as the council hoped? Or had they become something else entirely? The journey to Sol took 2 weeks. As they approached the barrier, Velthra reviewed everything she knew about humans. Their history of warfare, their capacity for forgiveness, their tendency to help others even at cost to themselves, their pride, their anger, their hope. She had no idea how they would respond to the council's request. She hoped they would help. She feared they would not. She worried they might do something completely unexpected, something no one had considered. The fleet emerged from FTL travel at the edge of the quantum barrier. It shimmered before them, a wall of twisted space-time that had held for 5 centuries. Scanners showed nothing beyond it. The barrier was designed to block all signals, all sensors, all communication. We're broadcasting on all frequencies, the communications officer reported. Standard diplomatic codes. Requesting permission to enter and negotiate. They waited. Minutes passed. Then hours. The fleet hung in space, 12 ships facing an impenetrable wall, hoping someone on the other side was listening. Then suddenly something changed. A section of the barrier rippled. Space itself seemed to tear open, and through that tear came ships. They were beautiful and terrifying, sleek black hulls that seemed to absorb light. Designs that were almost organic, flowing like living creatures rather than mechanical constructs. They moved without visible engines, sliding through space with perfect grace. The council's sensors went wild, detecting energy signatures that made no sense, physics that violated known laws. How many? Velthra asked, her voice barely a whisper. 43, the sensor officer replied. No, wait. More appearing. 70, 90. They're folding space, appearing from nowhere. Over 200 now. Still counting. Are they hostile? Unknown. They're surrounding us, but weapons are not charging. They're just watching. Velthra took a deep breath. This was it. First contact with humanity after 500 years of isolation. She opened a communication channel. This is Ambassador Velthra of the Galactic Council. We come in peace, requesting permission to speak with representatives of humanity. Static. Then a voice speaking in the common galactic language, but with an accent that sent chills through Velthra. The accent of someone who had learned the language from records, not from interaction. This is Captain Sarah Okonkwo Chen of the Human Confederacy Navy. You have entered restricted space. State your purpose. The surname caught Velthra's attention. Okonkwo Chen, a combination of 2 names from human records. One of them had been the physicist who developed space-folding technology. The other had been the ambassador who faced the council 500 years ago. This captain was likely descended from both. The symbolism was not lost on anyone. We seek assistance, Velthra said simply. The galaxy is under attack by an alien force we cannot defeat. We are requesting aid in defense of all sentient life. A long pause. Then, why should we help you? It was the question Velthra had been dreading. Because billions are dying. Because they are innocent of the crimes committed against your people. Because helping others is the right thing to do regardless of past grievances. Another pause. Velthra could imagine the humans on the other side debating, arguing, discussing. Were they still the same species the Council had expelled? Or had isolation changed them into something new? You will follow our ships, Captain Okonkwo-Chen finally said. Do not deviate from the designated course. Do not activate weapons. Do not scan our vessels or installations. We will take you to Mars, where the Confederacy Council will decide whether to hear your petition. Agreed, Velthra said quickly. The human ships moved with precision, forming an escort around the Council fleet. Then space folded and they were moving, not through FTL in the traditional sense. One moment they were at the barrier's edge. The next Mars was visible ahead, massive and alive. Velthra stared in shock. She had seen records of Mars before humanity's expulsion. A cold, dusty world with a few small colonies. This was nothing like that. The entire planet seemed to glow with city lights. Orbital rings circled it like jewelry. Hundreds of ships moved in organized patterns. This wasn't a colony. This was a civilization. 500 years, she whispered. What did you become? Their ships were directed to dock at a massive station orbiting Mars. As Velthra and her delegation disembarked, they found themselves in a corridor that was clearly designed to impress or intimidate. The walls displayed holographic images, human achievements over the past 5 centuries, megastructures in the asteroid belt, terraformed moons, technological breakthroughs, and military victories against themselves. Humans fighting humans in conflicts that made the Council's recent battles look like training exercises. A reception committee waited for them. 20 humans representing different factions of the Confederacy. They were diverse in ways the Council members found unsettling. Some looked baseline human. Others had obvious enhancements. Metallic implants, glowing eyes, skin that shimmered with nanite colonies. One appeared to be more machine than organic. Another seemed to phase slightly, as if not entirely in this dimension. The leader stepped forward. She was an older woman, her hair white but her posture military straight. Her eyes were enhanced, glowing faintly blue. When she spoke, her voice carried authority earned through experience, not protocol. I am High Coordinator Marcus. Welcome to the Confederacy. You have asked for our help. Before we discuss that, you need to understand what you're asking for. She gestured and the holographic displays changed. Now they showed battles. Human ships fighting unknown enemies in simulated combat. Tactics that were aggressive, creative, and often seemingly suicidal. Flanking maneuvers that required perfect timing, kamikaze runs that sacrificed ships to create openings, psychological warfare that targeted enemy morale. We are not the species you expelled, Marcus continued. 500 years of isolation changed us. We had to fight for every resource. We had to innovate or die. We became harder, more efficient, more dangerous. If we help you, we will do things your way. We will use methods you find disturbing. We will take risks you consider unacceptable. And we will expect you to trust us. Velthra met the woman's enhanced gaze. Show us the Ravagers. Show us what we're fighting. The displays changed again. Velthra provided data from Council encounters with the swarm. Composition, tactics, adaptive capabilities. The humans studied everything in silence. Finally, one of them spoke. A younger man with cybernetic enhancements covering half his face. They're not a hive mind. Look at the pattern distribution. They're networked, but with distributed intelligence. Each unit has some autonomy but shares information with the collective. How can you tell that? A Council military advisor asked. Because we've fought networked enemies before, the man replied. Against each other. During the Belt Wars, the Titan Collective used similar tactics. We learned how to counter them. You fought wars against yourselves. The Council advisor sounded horrified. Of course, Marcus said simply. We're human, we fight, but we learn from it. Every conflict makes us better at the next one. That's what you need. Not a species that fears violence, but a species that understands it. The humans debated among themselves, speaking in rapid-fire exchanges that the Council translators struggled to keep up with. They argued, disagreed, challenged each other's ideas. It was chaos, but it was productive chaos. Within an hour, they had identified potential weaknesses in the Ravager swarm that Council analysts had missed in months of study. They adapt quickly, but adaptation requires processing time, a tactical specialist explained. If you hit them with multiple different attack types simultaneously, they can't adjust fast enough. The problem is your fleets don't train for that kind of coordinated assault. We can learn, Kreshitar said. He had accompanied the delegation as military liaison. Not fast enough, Marcus replied bluntly. Your crews are trained for precision and protocol. Ours are trained for chaos and improvisation. You need us, so you'll help? Velthra asked, hope rising in her chest. Marcus looked at her delegation. That depends. What are you offering? What do you want? The barrier comes down, permanently. Full reinstatement in the Council with all rights and privileges. Reparations for 500 years of forced isolation, and a formal apology, delivered by First Speaker Sorchen personally. The demands hung in the air. The Council advisors looked uncomfortable. It was too much. Too humiliating. But Velthra thought about the billions already dead. The world's already lost. The red markers advancing on the strategic displays. I can't promise all of that, she said. But I can promise to advocate for it. Marcus smiled, but it wasn't a friendly expression. Then advocate hard, Ambassador. Because every day you delay, more people die. And every death makes us less inclined to risk our lives for yours. She was right, and Velthra knew it. The humans held all the leverage. They could sit behind their barrier and watch the galaxy burn. The Council needed them far more than they needed the Council. Give us time, Velthra said. Come with us. Meet the Council. Let them see what you've become. Let them understand what you can do. The humans conferred again. Finally, Marcus nodded. We'll send a battle group. 50 ships, enough to make a difference in a single engagement. Not enough to win the war alone. Consider it a demonstration. If the Council wants our full support, they'll meet our terms. If not, we return home and seal the barrier behind us. It wasn't everything Velthra hoped for, but it was more than she feared. Thank you, she said sincerely. Marcus's expression softened slightly. Don't thank us yet, Ambassador. You're about to see what happens when you let humans off the leash. It won't be pretty, but it will be effective. The journey back to Council space was tense. Velthra's diplomatic fleet traveled alongside 50 human warships, and the contrast was stark. The Council vessels were elegant, designed as much for appearance as function. The human ships were pure predators, sleek black, and covered in weapon ports that could deploy in seconds. Captain Okonkwo Chen commanded the human fleet from her flagship, a vessel she called the Vindication. Velthra thought the name was appropriate. The humans had spent 500 years waiting for this moment, proving they were more than the Council believed them to be. During the trip, Velthra spent time learning about modern humanity. She toured the Vindication, meeting crew members who represented the diverse factions of the Confederacy. Some were baseline humans, unchanged from their ancestors. Others had chosen enhancements, stronger muscles, better reflexes, enhanced cognition. A few had gone further, becoming something between human and machine or human and something else entirely. Why do you allow such diversity? Velthra asked Captain Okonkwo Chen as they stood on the observation deck. Doesn't it create conflict? The captain smiled. Constantly. We argue about everything. Ethics of enhancement, resource allocation, cultural differences. Sometimes those arguments turn violent. That's terrible. That's human, Okonkwo Chen corrected. We're not a hive mind. We don't think the same way or want the same things, but we've learned to channel that conflict productively. Our diversity makes us stronger, because every problem can be approached from multiple angles. The Council believes uniformity creates strength. The Council is dying because of that belief, the captain said bluntly. Your species have been following the same patterns for millennia. When something new appears, something that doesn't fit your patterns, you have no idea how to respond. You're like an organism that never developed an immune system because you lived in a sterile environment. Velthra wanted to argue, but she couldn't. The captain was right. The Ravagers had exposed every weakness in Council doctrine, every gap in their thinking. They had been so focused on maintaining peace that they forgot how to fight for it. Will you teach us? Velthra asked quietly. Okonkwo Chen looked at her with those enhanced eyes that saw more than natural vision allowed. Maybe, if you're willing to learn. But learning from us means accepting that your way isn't the only way. It means admitting the council made mistakes. Can your people do that? I don't know, Velthra admitted. But I hope so. When the combined fleet arrived at the council station, they found it surrounded by defensive installations and military vessels. The council was taking no chances. They didn't know if the humans were coming as saviors or conquerors. First Speaker Sorchen met them in the council chamber, the same massive room where humanity had been judged 500 years before. But this time the humans weren't petitioners. They were equals. Or perhaps more than equals. High Coordinator Marcus led the human delegation. She walked with confidence, flanked by representatives from different Confederacy factions. Behind them came military advisors, technical specialists, and historians who had studied every aspect of the Ravager threat. First Speaker, Marcus said, her voice echoing through the chamber. We meet under unfortunate circumstances. Sorchen's telepathic presence felt strained, uncomfortable. High Coordinator, the Council is grateful that humanity has answered our call for aid. We haven't answered yet, Marcus corrected. We've come to listen. Whether we help depends on what we hear. The Council members shifted uneasily. They weren't used to being spoken to this way. For millennia, they had been the ultimate authority in known space. Now they were supplicants. What do you want to know? Sorchen asked. Everything. Show us the full scope of the war. Don't hide anything. Don't make yourselves look better than you are. We need truth, not politics. For the next 6 hours, Council military advisors presented data. Casualty reports, lost worlds, failed strategies, fleet deployments, economic impacts. The sheer scale of the disaster was staggering. Over 50 worlds consumed, 30 billion sentients dead, hundreds of fleets destroyed or scattered, and the Ravagers were still advancing. The human delegation listened in silence, their enhanced minds processing information faster than normal beings could. They took notes, asked technical questions, and occasionally conferred among themselves in rapid speech. Finally, Marcus stood. We can help you, but you need to understand the cost. Name your price, Sorchen said. Not that kind of cost. I mean the cost of what you're asking us to do. War isn't clean. It isn't pretty. People will die even on your side. We'll make decisions that seem cruel. We'll sacrifice lives to save others. We'll use tactics that you'll find morally questionable. Are you prepared for that? The chamber fell silent. These were things the Council didn't talk about. In their carefully ordered civilization, every life was precious. Every decision went through committees. Every action was weighed and measured. If we don't accept, Sorchen asked, what happens? The Ravagers consume the galaxy. Everyone dies anyway. At least our way, some survive. Admiral Kreshitar stood from his section. I have studied human military history. I have seen the records of your wars. You are right that your methods are brutal. But I have also seen that they work. We can afford to be squeamish, or we can afford to survive. Not both. Other council members began speaking, some in support, others in opposition. The debate raged as it always did, careful and measured and slow. The humans watched with expressions that mixed pity and frustration. We don't have time for this, one of the human advisors muttered to Marcus. Let them talk, Marcus replied. They need to convince themselves. Eventually, Sorchen called for a vote. The question: would the Council accept human military command of defensive operations with full authority to conduct the war as they saw fit? The vote was close, 27 in favor, 20 against, but it passed. Then we're agreed, Marcus said. Effective immediately, all Council military forces will fall under Confederacy command structure. We'll need complete access to your ship specifications, crew capabilities, and resource inventories. We'll also need authorization to recruit volunteers from your populations for specialized training. You'll train our people, Velthra asked. Those willing to learn. We can't turn your entire military into human-style fighters, but we can teach adaptive thinking, how to respond to unexpected situations, how to improvise when plans fail. What about your demands? A council member asked. The barrier, the apology, the reparations? Marcus smiled coldly. We'll discuss that after we save your civilization. Right now, focus on survival. Politics can wait. The transformation began immediately. Human advisors spread throughout council space, embedding with military units. They assessed capabilities, identified strengths and weaknesses, and began training programs that shocked conventional commanders. "Stop thinking in formations," adiatori, human tactical instructor shouted at a group of Corsian pilots. "The Ravagers don't care about your perfect battle lines. They'll flow around them, exploit gaps, hit from unexpected angles. You need to think like water, adapt to the container, find the cracks, flow where they're weak." The pilots struggled. They had been trained for precision, not improvisation. But slowly, with the human instructors pushing them hard, they began to understand. On another training ground, Valerian telepaths worked with human psychological warfare specialists. "You're telepathic," the human said. "That's an advantage the Ravagers don't have. Use it. Coordinate in real time. Share information instantly. But more than that, project confusion. The swarm is networked. If you can disrupt their communication even briefly, you create openings." "We've never used our abilities as weapons," a Valerian protested. "Then learn. War isn't about what you want to do. It's about what you must do to survive." Not everyone adapted. Some council officers resigned rather than follow human methods. Some species found the training too aggressive, the expectations too demanding. But enough stayed and enough learned. Slowly, the council's military began to change. Meanwhile, human engineers examined council ships and shook their heads in disappointment. "These are beautiful," one engineer told Admiral Kreshtar, "but they're built for show. Half the internal space is wasted on aesthetics. Your power distribution is inefficient. Your weapons are standardized when they should be varied. And don't even get me started on your armor configuration." "Can you improve them?" Kreshtar asked. "Not enough, not quickly. These ships are fundamentally designed for peacetime operations, but we can outfit them with some of our weapons, upgrade their sensors, and teach your crews better tactical positioning. It won't make them equal to our ships, but it'll make them more survivable." The humans also brought their own technology, weapons that folded space to strike targets instantly, defensive fields that redirected attacks to alternate dimensions, communication systems that couldn't be jammed or intercepted, mining drones that could strip an asteroid in hours, providing raw materials for rapid ship construction. "Where did you get all this?" Velthra asked Captain Okonkwo Chen as she toured a human manufacturing facility that had been deployed in the asteroid belt. "We invented it, we had to. The barrier trapped us, but it also forced us to innovate. We couldn't trade for technology, couldn't borrow ideas from other species. Everything we have, we created from scratch or reverse engineered from what we remembered. It's remarkable. It's survival. You learn or you die. That's the fundamental truth the Council forgot." 3 weeks after the humans arrived, the first joint operation was launched. A Ravager tendril was advancing on a heavily populated system. Council fleets had been avoiding direct engagement, trying to evacuate civilians instead. The humans had a different approach. "We hit them here," Captain Okonkwo Chen said, pointing to a spot on the tactical display. "This narrow passage is the only FTL route into the system that doesn't require 2 weeks of travel time. The Ravagers will use it because they always take the fastest path. We should defend the planet," a council admiral argued. "We should kill the threat before it reaches the planet," Okonkwo Chen countered. "Defense is reactive. We need to be proactive. We lay a trap, lure them in, and hit them with everything we have. What if the trap fails? Then we fall back and defend the planet, but the trap won't fail." The confidence was unsettling, but the council officers had agreed to follow human command. The trap was set. Human ships took position in the asteroid field near the passage. Council vessels formed a secondary line further back. Automated weapons platforms were deployed throughout the area, all under human control. The Ravagers arrived exactly as predicted. Thousands of organic ships moving in their characteristic swarm pattern, flowing toward the inhabited system like a living tide. The humans waited. And waited. Council officers watched nervously as the swarm entered the passage. Why weren't they attacking? "Hold," Okonkwo Chen ordered. "Let them commit." The swarm was halfway through the passage when the captain gave the order. "All units, execute." What happened next was chaos incarnate. The asteroid field erupted as hidden weapons fired from every angle. Space itself folded, redirecting attacks from unexpected vectors. Human ships appeared from nowhere, having folded space to skip past normal positioning. Council vessels fired in coordinated waves, different weapon types hitting simultaneously to prevent adaptation. The Ravagers tried to respond, but they couldn't adapt to everything at once. Plasma fire burned through their organic hulls. Kinetic strikes shattered their structure. Dimensional weapons sent sections of the swarm into alternate realities where they couldn't return. In 20 minutes, 80% of the swarm was destroyed. The rest fled, limping back the way they came. The Council forces stared in shock. They had just won. Actually won. For the first time since the war began, they had inflicted a decisive defeat on the Ravagers. "That's how you fight," Marcus said, from the command center, watching the battle on displays. Not with honor, not with rules, with overwhelming force applied at the enemy's weakest point. Simple, brutal, effective. Word of the victory spread quickly through Council space. Hope, which had been dying, flickered back to life. The humans could win this war. Maybe the galaxy had a chance after all. But in the human command center, celebrations were muted. Okonkwo Chen looked at the casualty reports. 12 Council ships destroyed, 2,000 crew members dead, 3 human vessels damaged, 50 casualties. "First blood," she said quietly. "Now comes the hard part." "What's the hard part?" Velthra asked. "Keeping them from hating us. We just showed the Council that they need us, that without human help, they'll die. Some will be grateful, but others will resent us for it. They'll remember that we succeeded where they failed. Pride is a powerful poison, Ambassador, and we just forced them to swallow a large dose." Velthra understood. The victory had been necessary, but it had also been humiliating. The Council had been fighting for months without success. Humans had arrived and won the first engagement decisively. That would create complications. "What do we do?" she asked. "We keep winning," Okonkwo Chen replied. "We keep saving lives, and we hope that when this is over, gratitude outweighs resentment. Because if it doesn't, we'll have saved a galaxy that still hates us. And that would be ironic, wouldn't it?" "Would you regret helping us?" The captain was quiet for a long moment. "No, because this is what humans do. We protect people, even people who hurt us, even people who don't deserve it. It's our greatest strength and our greatest weakness. We can't help ourselves." Velthra felt a wave of emotion she couldn't quite name. These humans, these violent, chaotic warriors, had more compassion than most Council species she knew. They had been wronged, imprisoned, forgotten, and they came anyway when called. "Thank you," she said softly. "Thank us when it's over," Okonkwo Chen replied. "We've got a long war ahead of us." The war raged for 8 months. 8 months of brutal fighting, clever tactics, and tremendous sacrifice. The humans taught the Council forces how to fight adaptively, how to think creatively, how to turn every weakness into potential strength. Slowly, world by world, the tide began to turn. But it was not easy. The Ravagers were learning too. Every victory came at a cost. Ships destroyed, lives lost, entire fleets sometimes sacrificed to achieve strategic objectives. The Council members, who had voted for human military command, began to understand what that truly meant. High Coordinator Marcus stood in the war room, surrounded by holographic displays showing 17 different battle zones. She looked older than she had when they arrived. The weight of command, of choosing who lived and who died, aged even enhanced humans. "The Ravagers are pulling back toward this sector," Admiral Kreshitar said, pointing to a cluster of systems near the galactic rim. "Our intelligence suggests they're consolidating, possibly preparing for a major counterattack." "Or retreating to their source," Marcus replied. "We've been pushing them back but haven't found their origin point. They have to come from somewhere." A human tactical officer brought up new data. "We've been tracking debris from destroyed Ravager ships. The organic material shows increasing genetic degradation the further coreward we find it. That suggests they traveled a long distance before reaching Council space. Their origin is likely in the dark space between galaxies. Can we track them there? Velthra asked. She had become an unofficial liaison between humans and the Council, spending most of her time with the Confederacy forces. We can try, Captain Okonkwo Chen said. She had been promoted to Fleet Admiral after the Battle of Caesarion Prime, where her tactics had saved 12 billion lives. But following them into dark space is risky. We'd be on their territory, facing unknown numbers, with no reinforcements. Then we need to force a decisive engagement before they fully retreat, Marcus decided. Something large enough to break their offensive capability permanently. Over the next week, human strategists developed a plan that made even the most aggressive Council commanders nervous. They would identify the main Ravager fleet, the central node that coordinated all the smaller swarms. Then they would attack it with overwhelming force, risking everything on a single battle. This is insane, a Valerian military advisor protested during the strategy briefing. You're proposing to commit 70% of our combined fleets to one engagement. If we lose everything. If we don't do this, we die slowly instead of quickly, Marcus replied. The Ravagers are adapting to our tactics. Every day they get better at countering us. We have a window of advantage, maybe a few weeks. After that we're back to losing. How can you be certain the main fleet is where you think it is? A human intelligence officer, her body covered in cybernetic implants that connected her directly to sensor networks, spoke up. We've been tracking communication patterns in the swarm for months. There's a central nexus, a location where all data flows converge. That's where their command structure exists. Kill that, and the rest of the swarm loses coordination. You're gambling the fate of the galaxy on a theory, Sorchin said. We're gambling the fate of the galaxy on human expertise, Marcus corrected. This is what we do. This is what you asked for when you came to Sol. Trust us or don't, but decide now. We don't have time for committee meetings. The Council voted. This time the margin was wider. Desperation had overcome caution. The attack was approved. The largest fleet in galactic history assembled at the staging point. Over 3,000 ships, human vessels with their reality-bending weapons, Council, warships upgraded with human technology, support craft carrying medical supplies and repair drones, and suicide ships piloted by volunteers who knew they wouldn't return. Admiral Okonkwo Chen commanded the fleet from her flagship. Beside her, Admiral Kreshitar led the Council forces. Two very different species, two very different philosophies, united by necessity. Strange, isn't it? Kreshitar said, as they watched the fleet complete its formation. 500 years ago, my ancestors voted to exile yours. Now we fight side by side. History is full of ironies, Okonkwo Chen replied. The enemy of my enemy becomes my friend. Until the war ends and we remember why we were enemies. Do you think that will happen? When this is over, will humans and the Council become enemies again? I hope not. But humans have a saying. Hope for the best, prepare for the worst. We'll fight this war with you, but we haven't forgotten. We won't forget. The fleet jumped to FTL, a coordinated movement that would have been impossible for the Council military before human training. They emerged at the target location, a region of space where sensors detected massive gravitational anomalies and organic matter concentrations that defied measurement. The Ravagers were waiting. The swarm was enormous, larger than anything they had encountered before. Millions of organic ships, some as small as fighters, others the size of moons. They moved with coordinated precision, forming patterns that seemed almost beautiful if you ignored that they were instruments of extinction. Contact in 30 seconds, the tactical officer announced. All ships report ready. Okonkwo Chen took a deep breath. This was it. Everything came down to this moment. All fleet, this is Admiral Okonkwo Chen. Today we fight not for territory, not for resources, not for ideology. We fight for survival. For every species in this galaxy. For every child who deserves to grow up without fear. The enemy before us is relentless, but so are we. They adapt, but we improvise. They consume, but we create. Today, we show them that life is stronger than hunger. That intelligence is stronger than instinct, that together we are unstoppable. All ships engage. The battle began. What followed was chaos on a scale that defied description. 3,000 ships against millions of organic vessels. Space lit up with weapons fire, explosions, and the strange distortions caused by reality-bending technology. Ships folded space, appearing behind enemy lines. Suicide craft rammed into Ravager nodes, sacrificing themselves to create openings. Council vessels fired in waves, different weapon types cycling to prevent adaptation. The humans had taught well. Council crews that once moved by strict protocol now improvised, responded to changing conditions, covered each other's weaknesses. A Corsian cruiser saved a human destroyer by intercepting a Ravager strike craft, then was saved in turn by a Valerian frigate that appeared from an unexpected vector. In the command center, Okonkwo Chen monitored 17 different battle zones simultaneously, making decisions in seconds that would have taken the Council hours. Third Fleet, push through their left flank. Seventh Fleet, fall back and regroup. Suicide Squadron 7, you're cleared for your run. Suicide Squadron acknowledging, came a calm voice. It's been an honor. 30 seconds later, 7 ships loaded with antimatter charges detonated in the heart of a Ravager formation, creating a gap that human strike craft exploited ruthlessly. The casualty count rose. 100 ships destroyed, 200, 500. The numbers were staggering, but they kept fighting because there was no alternative. Then the human intelligence officer shouted, I found it! The Nexus! Coordinates! Transmitted to all fleet elements. On the displays, a massive structure appeared. It looked organic but structured, a grotesque parody of a space station grown from living material. Energy readings from it were off the scale. This was the brain of the swarm, the coordinator, the queen of the hive. All available firepower. Target that structure, Marcus ordered from the command center back in Council space. Everything we have. The fleet converged. Every weapon, every ship that could still fight focused on the Nexus. The Ravagers tried to defend it, forming a living wall of ships around their central mind. But the combined fleet pushed through, accepting horrific losses to get within range. Weapons range in 10 seconds, Okonkwo Chen said. All ships fire on my mark. The Ravagers threw everything at them. Ships exploded. Hulls were breached. Entire sections of the fleet disappeared in seconds. But enough survived. Mark. 3,000 ships, or what remained of them, fired simultaneously. Plasma, kinetic rounds, missiles, dimensional disruptors, reality bombs. Every weapon in the human and Council arsenal unleashed at once. The Nexus tried to defend itself, but there was too much, from too many directions, using too many different principles. The structure shattered. Not explosively, but like something organic dying. It collapsed in on itself, its energy readings dropping to 0 in seconds. And throughout the swarm, something changed. The Ravagers stopped moving with coordination. They began firing randomly, colliding with each other, fleeing in every direction without pattern or purpose. The hive mind was dead, and the individual units had no idea what to do. All ships, continue firing, Okonkwo Chen ordered. Don't let up. Kill everything that moves. It took 6 more hours. 6 hours of sustained combat against an enemy that was no longer coordinated, but was still dangerous. Ships that would have been overwhelming when networked became manageable when isolated. One by one, the Ravager vessels were destroyed. Finally, Admiral Kreshtar made the announcement everyone had been waiting for. All fleet ceasefire. Enemy forces are eliminated or fleeing. The battle is won. The command center erupted in cheers. Council space, watching through communication links, exploded with celebration. The Ravagers were broken. The war, though not completely over, had been decided. Okonkwo Chen allowed herself a moment of relief. Then she looked at the casualty reports. Over 800 ships destroyed. 200,000 casualties, both human and Council. The victory had been won, but the price had been terrible. Patch me through to all surviving ships, she said. When the connection was established, she spoke. This is Admiral Okonkwo Chen to all fleet elements. Today you fought with courage and skill. You came from different worlds, different species, different philosophies. But you fought as one. You proved that when we work together, when we combine our strengths and cover our weaknesses, nothing can stop us. Remember this moment. Remember what we achieved together. And honor those who gave everything so that others might live. The cleanup took weeks. Ships were repaired. Wounded were treated. The dead were honored according to their various customs. Smaller Ravager elements were hunted down and eliminated throughout Council space. It would take years to fully secure the galaxy, but the existential threat was over. During this time, negotiations began about humanity's status. The debate was intense. Some Council members wanted to simply thank the humans and send them back to Sol. Others argued for full reinstatement. A few suggested that humans should take a leadership role in the reformed galaxy. First Speaker Sorchin, who had led the Council throughout the crisis, made an announcement. I am resigning my position. The Council needs new leadership. Leadership that understands the galaxy has changed, but before I go, there is something I must do. He traveled to Mars, to the same station where Velthra had first negotiated with humanity. High Coordinator Marcus met him in a simple conference room, not the grand chambers where such meetings usually occurred. First Speaker, Marcus said, you asked for this meeting. I did. Sorchin's telepathic presence felt heavy with emotion. 500 years ago, I voted to expel humanity. I was younger then, certain that peace required conformity. I was wrong. We were all wrong. We punished you for being different, for refusing to fit our comfortable patterns. And when we faced a threat that our patterns couldn't handle, you saved us anyway. You're apologizing, Marcus said. I am, formally and officially. The Galactic Council was wrong to expel humanity. We let fear overcome wisdom. We valued order over justice. And we paid for that mistake with billions of lives that could have been saved if we had not been so arrogant. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Thank you. That means more than you know. But an apology isn't enough, I know. That's why I'm here to negotiate the terms of humanity's return, not as supplicants but as equals, perhaps as leaders. The galaxy needs human thinking, human adaptability, human courage. What are you offering? Full reinstatement with voting rights equal to any founding member. A permanent seat on the Security Council. Reparations to be determined by independent arbitration. Removal of the barrier, effective immediately. And a formal restructuring of Council law to ensure no species is ever expelled for cultural differences again. That's more generous than I expected. It's less than you deserve. The galaxy owes humanity a debt we can never fully repay. We can only try to do better going forward. The negotiations took 3 months, not because the terms were disputed, but because every detail had to be perfect. The new treaty was called the Charter of Unity, and it fundamentally reformed how the Galactic Council operated. The ceremony was held in the rebuilt Council chamber. Representatives from all member species attended, including 8 human delegations representing different Confederacy factions. The barrier around Sol had come down the day before. Its quantum generators deactivated after 5 centuries of operation. Velthra, now appointed as Council Historian for Life, read the preamble to the new charter. We, the sentient species of this galaxy, acknowledge that diversity is strength, that different perspectives are valuable, and that unity requires accepting differences rather than eliminating them. We pledge never again to exile a species for cultural reasons. We commit to protecting all life, not just life that thinks like us. We embrace the chaos of creativity, the unpredictability of innovation, and the strength that comes from working together despite our differences. The new first speaker, a young Caesarian chosen specifically because she had not been part of the old power structure, spoke next. The age of comfortable conformity is over. The age of active cooperation begins. We face the galaxy not as identical copies of a perfect template, but as allies with different strengths, covering each other's weaknesses. And we face it together. After the ceremony, Velthra found Admiral Okonkwo Chen standing on an observation deck, looking out at the stars. The Admiral was in civilian clothes now, having retired from active service after the war. Beautiful, isn't it? Velthra said, joining her. All those stars, all those worlds. All saved because you came when called. We almost didn't, Okonkwo Chen admitted. The vote in the Confederacy was close. A lot of humans wanted revenge, or at least wanted to stay isolated. We'd built something good in Sol. Coming back to the galaxy meant risking all of that. Why did you come then? The Admiral smiled. Because we're human. Protecting others, even those who wronged us, that's just what we do. We can't help ourselves. It's our nature. Maybe the Council was right to call us chaotic and unpredictable. but they were wrong to think those were weaknesses. The galaxy has learned that lesson well, Velthra said, sometimes the hard way. Sometimes lessons have to be hard to stick. Okonkwo Chen looked at the younger historian. What will you do now? Write about how the humans saved the galaxy? I'll write about how we saved ourselves by finally accepting help. About how pride nearly destroyed us. About how the species we feared became the species we needed most. Future generations should know that story. Make sure they also know the cost, the Admiral said quietly. 200,000 casualties. 800 ships destroyed. Hundreds of worlds damaged. This wasn't a clean victory. It was brutal and ugly and painful. War always is. I will, I promise. They stood in silence for a while, watching ships move through space. Human vessels and council vessels flying together now, no longer separate. The barrier was gone. The divisions were healing. The galaxy was learning to be chaotic, adaptive, and strong. 6 months later, a human colony ship arrived in a previously uninhabited system at the edge of council space. The colonists planted a monument on the first world they settled, a simple stone with words carved in multiple languages. Remember the barrier. Remember the exile. Remember the lesson. Different is not dangerous. Different is necessary. Together we are stronger than apart. Never again alone. As humanity spread back into the galaxy, more monuments appeared on more worlds, reminders of what had happened, what had been learned, what must never be forgotten. And in the council chamber, above the seats where representatives met to govern the galaxy, a new phrase was added to the official seal. In human English first, then translated into every language of every member species. Strength through adversity, unity through diversity, and never again alone. The galaxy had changed. Humanity had changed it, not through conquest or force, but by being exactly what they always were. Chaotic, creative, passionate, and impossibly brave. The council had banished them out of fear. The council had called them back out of desperation. But in the end, the galaxy kept them because they were exactly what civilization needed to survive. Admiral Okonkwo Chen was right. It was ironic. The species deemed too violent for peace became the guardians of that peace. The species deemed too chaotic for civilization became its saviors. The species that the council tried to forget became impossible to imagine living without. 500 years of exile had not broken humanity. It had forged them into something stronger. And when they returned to the galaxy, they did so not as supplicants but as protectors. Not as outsiders but as essential threads in the great tapestry of galactic civilization. The story of humanity's banishment and return would be told for millennia to come. It would be studied in schools, analyzed by historians, and remembered as the moment when the galaxy learned its most important lesson. That sometimes the things we fear most are the things we need most. That sometimes our salvation comes from the most unexpected places, and that sometimes the ones we push away are the ones who save us in the end. As Velthra wrote in her comprehensive history of the era, the council thought they were protecting the galaxy from humanity. In truth, they were protecting humanity from a galaxy that did not deserve them. And when that galaxy finally learned to deserve them, humanity came back not with anger but with open arms, because that ultimately is what makes them human.